Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Development Control meeting, and thank you all for coming. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located where you came in. Please note, this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. The webcast will also be published on YouTube after the meeting. Mobile phones, could all members and public please turn their phones off or to silent, please. Bernie, is the webcast live? Thank you. For the benefit of members of the public watching or participating in this meeting, I would like to explain who everyone is. My name is Councillor Nick Robinson and I'm chairman of this committee. Down the sides of the table are councillors who will be making decisions on the applications on this evening's agenda. To my immediate right and left are officers who will be presenting the applications and providing advice to the committee. The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee, not a political meeting. The committee will be considering the published papers, examining the evidence brought before us tonight, and will make decisions based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning policy and guidance. At the appropriate time, I will invite speakers to contribute to the meeting in the order set out in the update paper. May I ask all speakers, including visitors members, to speak clearly and keep the points made on the application on material reasons only. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. May I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and keep any comments on each planning item to a maximum of 4 minutes. This evening there are 8 items on the agenda and I anticipate being able to complete them within 3 hours. I understand that planning can be emotive and ask that everyone remains polite and professional through this evening. Thank you. Right. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence and substitutions. I have apologies from Councillor Gaskell and Councillor Tomlin, and I have Councillor McCormick substituting for Councillor Howard Sorrell, and have Councillor Falconer substituting for Councillor Court. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Has anybody anything? I have one, item 4. I am predetermined on it. I will leave the meeting and speak as a borough councillor, and that item will be chaired by Councillor Harvey. Thank you. Right, urgent matters. I've only got one personally. It's a very, very quick one. We've got quite a lot to get through, so the 2-question limit will be strictly applied tonight. There will be no third question from any councillors, and questions will be strictly limited to things that are pertinent to that application. So questions that start with, I had a nice meal in your restaurant, will not be allowed, and questions that finish with, how high do you think the building ought to be, will also not be allowed. And hopefully we'll all get home by 9:30. Thank you. Excuse me. Apparently it's application number 4 on item 7. It's the QPS house. Just so everybody knows, that is the one I will be leaving the meeting for. Thank you. Right, minutes of the previous meetings, minutes of the 7th of July. Is everybody happy with them? Could I have a proposer, Councillor Harvey, and a seconder, Councillor Ganesh? And for the 21st of July, I have a proposer, Councillor Frost, and a seconder, Councillor Ganesh. Thank you very much. So that's done. Right, applications for planning. Application number 1 is land at Pyatt's House, Pyatt's Hill. And if we could have Roger Doust to the public speaking table, please. If you could just wait there for a few moments whilst the officer introduces the case. Greg.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for the erection of 4 dwellings with associated garaging, parking, turning, landscaping, private amenity space and access. There is an update paper. On the update paper, for members' information, the ward councillors for this ward are listed incorrectly. Councillor Paul Gaskell should not be included in there. It's Councillor Raphael for this ward, and it's correct on the main order paper. The only other update is in respect of the agent who has agreed to the pre-commencement conditions now. I think for this application it's probably worth drawing members' attention to the history for the application site on page 84. There is some history to it. An original application was submitted in 2015. That was determined by the Development Control Committee for 2 reasons, which are summarised there. One in respect of the access and inappropriate traffic generation, and the second in respect of a lack of legal agreement. That application was for 9 dwellings. It was taken to appeal and it was dismissed to appeal. The inspector, though, concluded that there wouldn't be a highway safety issue as a result of the 9 dwellings. But whilst not agreeing with the council in respect of that reason for refusal, found that the proposal wouldn't preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area and therefore dismissed the appeal. Subsequently to that, an application was submitted in 2018, which was determined at the Development Control Committee for 3 dwellings. That was refused for 2 reasons. The first being in respect of the lack of mix of the properties then proposed, with no small units proposed, and also for the absence of a detailed management plan for the scheduled ancient monument on the site. This current application is now for 4 dwellings. 2 of the plots, the southern 2 most plots, are in exactly the same location as the previous 2018 application. And the northernmost plot is divided into 2 properties, 2 smaller properties, so 2 2-bed properties. So there is a mix now, and there is also a detailed scheduled ancient monument management plan that's been submitted that's not drawn any objection from any statutory consultees. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Greg. Mr. Doubts, you have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute left. Thank you. Sorry, could you press the button on the microphone, please?
Thank you. Thank you, councillors, for permitting me to address you regarding this application, which is strongly opposed by Old Basing and Lytle Parish Council, with 5 main objections to it. Firstly, it lies within the conservation area. Secondly, it is in breach of the village design statement, which is contained within the accepted neighbourhood plan for Old Basing and Lytle Parish Council, in that the proposed houses fail to meet the criteria identified, namely that houses mainly in this area are brick and timber framed cottages and barns with roofs that are hipped or half hipped and have small white painted windows. Thirdly, the parish is a rural one and we wish to retain as many mature feature trees as possible. The building of these 4 houses will mean the felling of 3 mature oak trees which currently form part of a continuous line of such feature trees. We know that if this development is permitted to go ahead, it is proposed to reinstate similar trees at a later date, but they would in no way replace these trees that are currently a feature of this garden and surrounding area. Fourthly, as we have previously mentioned in previous appeals to this council, Park Pale is an ancient monument of which there are few within the borough. This proposal means building across this monument, and even if it is carefully protected by the building of these houses, future owners of the buildings may be unaware of the presence of this feature and build extensions and other structures over it, further damaging the monument. The management plan submitted to Historic England is inadequate and would not secure the future conservation of the scheduled monument. The possible increase of traffic down this quiet country lane will cause disturbance and congestion, particularly as this proposed development is at the far end of Pyatt's Hill, and any extra vehicles would need to pass the whole length of the upper part of Pyatt's Hill. We respectfully ask you to take into consideration our fears over this development that this development will bring to the area, and we fully support the arguments put forward by the neighbours and other residents of this quiet country lane. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could you just turn your microphone off, please, and wait there to answer any questions? Questions to the speaker? No questions? I've let you off light tonight. Thank you very much. Next speaker, Mr. Tom Lytle, or Little? Lytle. Thank you. You have 4 minutes, and we'll warn you when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Right, yeah. Tom Lytle, 26 Pyatt's Hill, representing 77 other residents on, around nearby Pyatt's Hill in Old Basing and Chinham. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you about our concerns. The May elections 2020 truly demonstrated the democracy of the country in which we live, and congratulations to you for your victories. Being on the DCC means that you are here to ensure that the right houses are built in the right place, especially when the proposed houses involve infill of an established area. The planners are doing their best to sustain the 5-year housing stock. Unfortunately, their approval of this application may be wrong, as it was with 2 previous refused applications in 2015, upheld by an independent inspector on conservation grounds, and in 2018. The Democratic vote for this application is 90 votes to dismiss and only 4 for its favor. The majority of objectors who know the area intimately agree with the historic's last letter, stating that substantial harm will occur to the Pyatt's Hill entrenchment despite a management plan of damage. We agree with the conservation that there will be substantial harm to the Old Basing Conservation Area. We agree that there is unsustainable access to the development. We agree with the concerns of the Old Basing Parish Council. We agree with the concerns of Cycle Basingstoke and Heather Rainbow that the development's effect will use of the user's National Cycle Route 23 that runs along this section of Pyatt's Hill, and there are many cyclists. The Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Areas Act 1979 states that an adverse impact to such thing as the Pyatt's Hill entrenchment might be accepted only in wholly exceptional circumstances. The development of these new 4 houses are not wholly exceptional circumstances. The entrenchment is believed to be only one of its kind in Hampshire, and consistent to be of high significance with regard to all historical values. Bryant Homes Limited, who built Lily Mill Chine Estate immediately to the north, has respected the entrenchment and the Act of 1979 and provided a 20-meter buffer between it and the front houses of the estate. Forward planning teams are demanding the same respect and want at least a 20-meter buffer between the entrenchment and the 900 houses to be built in the land of east of Basingstoke, immediately next door to Pyatt's house. Remember, this area will not be short of adequate and affordable homes. This development does not respect the entrenchment that runs along the length of Pyatt's house, nor does it respect its 213 years of undisturbed history with Pyatt's house. It would be carved up into 4 gardens and houses, and the existing tree and vegetations are to be removed. Then consider the Pyatt's Hill Copse Sink to the immediate south, designated for its ancient woodland. An aerial photo via Google Earth and a picture view of it from the field east of it immediately shows that the trees of the southernmost part of Pyett's house are indeed a continuum of the woodland. As such,
You have
the
1
trees
minute.
of Pyett's house 19 to 24, which are planned to be culled, should not be culled to produce space for the development, but should be protected like the entrenchment by a 20-meter border specified by the borough's tree and biodiversity teams. Houses of this development are less than 5 meters from these ancient trees. Finally, there are unsustainable problems of access up Pyett's Hill from Holly Tree Cottage to Pyett's house. It's a narrow single-track lane, 600 meters long, and it's a cul-de-sac with no footpaths, no street lighting or passing places, and sections between Pyett'sboro to Pyett's house, a distance of 203 meters, is a major bottleneck, and only one car can travel in at a time. The applicant's own transport expert concluded the use of Pyett's Hill to access houses to the two existing ones is unacceptable because of the standard and layout of the road. Thank you, and I hope that you consider the 90 versus 4 when you make your decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could just turn your microphone off for a moment, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Questions to Mr. Lytle? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Lytle. Thank you for coming. Okay, I would like you to explain on page 96 of the papers that we've been given, you may not have that, okay, the county archaeologist has not raised an objection to this particular proposal, even though he does say that there is a potential impact of the setting on the Sami site. However, on balance, the county archaeologist recognises that the impact of the proposed development, proposed dwellings on the site is consistent with the developments on the north and south. And
Councillor Frost, what is your question?
Yeah,
please?
yeah, my question is coming up, Chair. So I'm just wondering if the county archaeologist is not on balance against this development, okay, how do you explain that you and your supporters are?
Well, as I said, the entrenchment is one of its kind in Hampshire and is considered to be of high significance. Now, the people who obviously are in charge of building the estates to the north of it have considered these findings, and they've respected it by the entrenchment and the act, which obviously is different from the archaeologist people, and provided the 20-meter buffer. And I just think that that includes the argument against what the archaeologist has said, and same for the 20-meter buffer that will occur with the 900 houses on the land east of Basingstoke. It's just that the buffer does provide any damage, provides against any damage to the entrenchment. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Thank you, Chair, for giving me a final second question. I'm just a bit concerned here that there are a number of conditions, 22, 23 and 24, okay, of which we actually have the agent or applicant have agreed to, which actually protect, okay, the buried archaeological remains. Okay, I'm just wondering why are you considering that plan and those conditions are not sufficient?
Again, I'm only going along by the conditions set by the biodiversity and the tree team, saying that, particularly for the ancient wood next door, that they've implied a 20-meter, they've specified a 20-meter border between the woodland next door, and obviously I'm trying to say that the woodland and the continuum is a continuum of this, and this is on the entrenchment, so that I'm only agreeing with the biodiversity and the tree teams to protect the entrenchment, if that makes sense.
Thank you. If you could turn your mic off. There we go. Any more questions? Councillor Gardner.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Can I just ask you, Mr. Lytle, how close do you think some of these new houses, if allowed, would be to the ancient monument?
If you consider that The trees of the southernmost portion of Piatt's Hill are actually indeed a continuum of the ancient woodland. Plots 1 and 2 will be within 5 meters, and those of 3 and 4 will be less than 5 meters. And as specified by the biodiversity teams and the tree teams, they said there should be at least a 20-meter buffer between it and the ancient trees.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Lytle. Before you leave the table, to your right, there's a tub of wipes. If you could wipe the front edge of the table, the microphone button and the chair down, the arms of the chair, that would be, I'm sure that would be appreciated by the next speaker.
Oh.
And if we could have Mark Pettit and Mr. Freeman, please. Thank you. You have 4 minutes between you, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mark Pettit, and I prepared and submitted this planning application. Alongside me is one of the applicants, Dr. Hugh Freeman, who's resided at Piatt's House with his wife Meg since 1990. The application that's before members seeks full planning permission for the erection of 4 dwellings on land that currently forms part of the garden to Piatt's House. It's recommended for approval, and we fully support this recommendation. Now, some of the members may be familiar with the site, as it was the subject of a planning application back in 2019, where permission was sought to erect 3 detached dwellings on the site. The application went to committee in December 2019 with a recommendation for approval, but it was refused by members for the following 2 reasons. 1, the proposed development would not make the optimal use of the site, which is within the settlement policy boundary, and would not provide dwellings of a scale and mix which would meet the need for smaller units. And 2, the final reason for refusal, the absence of a detailed management plan to protect and preserve the scheduled monument. In all other respects, the scheme was considered acceptable. The council's decision was not pursued as an appeal. Instead, the applicants decided to submit a fresh application to overcome the concerns expressed by committee members back in 2019. With this in mind, the current application has been with the council since April 2020, and now after 16 months or so, we have a scheme that the officer and Historic England are happy with. To overcome the first reason for refusal, we've increased the number of proposed dwellings to 4, thus making more effective use of the site. 50% of these will be smaller, 2-bedroom units, again in response to the concerns expressed at committee previously. In addition, the applicants have also agreed to make an off-site affordable housing contribution. This will be secured by way of a Section 106 agreement should members be minded to approve this application. In response to the second reason for refusal, this current application has been accompanied by a heritage management plan which has been prepared by AC Archaeology. This is a detailed plan which outlines the measures that will be taken going forward to ensure that Piatt's Hill entrenchment, which is a scheduled monument, is safeguarded. The aim is to ensure the monument's long-term protection. This will be achieved by, amongst other things, incorporating low-impact fencing and preventing any landscaping or garden features on the monument in the future. Furthermore, the interpretation of the monument will be enhanced through the provision of an information board. The management plan has raised no objection from Historic England and suggested condition numbers 25 at page 111 of the committee report will ensure that the development, if approved, is undertaken in accordance with the management plan. There are no technical reasons why this application should not prevail. There's been no objection from Highways, the landscape team, the tree officer, the housing team, the biodiversity officer, Historic England, Archaeology, Waste or Environmental
Health. You have 1 minute.
Conservation have raised some concerns with the design of the proposed houses. However, I would share the same view as the officer that the traditional approach to the scheme respects the character of the dwellings in the area. In summary, the site provides a fantastic opportunity to provide much needed housing within the borough at a time when the council cannot demonstrate an adequate supply. This current scheme is different to that presented at committee in 2019, and we hope that members appreciate the efforts that have been made to overcome the concerns expressed previously, along with the benefits of providing an off-site affordable housing contribution and a management plan for part of the scheduled monument. We believe that this proposal responds successfully to the sensitivities of the site, and certainly the positive consultation responses and the officer's recommendation would suggest that it has. The site falls within the settlement policy boundary of Old Basing, next door to a large strategic housing allocation, and is a logical site for a modest residential scheme such as this. We therefore respectfully request that planning permission be granted accordingly in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions to the speakers? Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Pages 116 and 117, there's some plans that appear to have been supplied by the architect. Come out a bit small font. Just wondering if you could assist me here. Which of the trees on the plot are being chopped down and which are new trees being planted? I have a hunch, but I was just wondering if you could assist.
Thank you. The arboricultural impact assessment and method statement that was submitted with the application that confirms which trees are proposed to be removed. There are three oak trees on the western side of the site that are proposed to be removed, and there are also I think it's 6 others in the kind of south eastern corner of the site, which are a mix of ash and hazel. The intention is that we're trying to keep as many of the trees as we can, but obviously, as is often the case with development, there has to be a degree of tree removal to allow development to come forward, to allow for appropriate usable garden areas to prevent overshadowing, that type of thing. But the applicants are fully committed to accepting the landscaping condition that's set out in the committee report and providing replacement planting where necessary.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm looking at the drawing now, and I can see some circles, quite a few of them, some of which appear to be overlapping with buildings. So I assume that they are trees that are going to have to be chopped down because the building's going to go there. But there does seem to be an awful lot of these circles, as opposed to a sort of more raggedy outline, which I assume from this drawing is trees that are going to remain in place.
Like I said, there will be a degree of tree removal. The full detail of that tree removal is outlined in the arboricultural report, which I have in front of me here, which I'm happy to circulate if anybody wants to take a look at it. Like I said, there are three oak trees on the western side of the site that will be removed. There are two dead stumps on the site as well, and there are I think it's 5 or 6 other trees in the southern southeastern part of the site, which are ash and hazel, which aren't of any particular arboricultural retention value. So all I would say is the level of tree removal is no different to the scheme that was presented to members back in 2019, and when that application was refused, there was no reason attached to that refusal, that decision notice, which related to the loss of trees. And I'd reiterate what I said in the committee report, that the tree officer has no objection to the proposals. And I'll reiterate again, the applicants have no issue with accepting a landscaping condition and providing a comprehensive, soft and hard landscaping scheme should permission be granted.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for coming on to speak tonight. Could you please clarify, okay, if you could please clarify where the ancient monument is on the site plan, and also can you please clarify, okay, which is going to be the closest house to that site, and also clarify that distance, please.
Thank you. Good question. The site plan doesn't actually show the, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't show actually the boundary of the monument. The western side of the monument is shown in the heritage management plan that we submitted along with the heritage statement. Sorry.
Can you just indicate which plot is the closest and where it's actually going to be?
I would say, sorry, the scheduled monument is on the western side of the site, so it runs north-south down the western side of the site. Yeah, down there. It's a bank, and then there's a ditch. So, let me just get the heritage management plan in front of me. Yeah, so it goes down there. So the distances between the houses and the monument will vary, and I think the distances vary between 5 and 15 metres or something like that. I think it's plot 4 at the bottom, which is the one which is the closest, because obviously the site kind of tapers in slightly down that end. The Hampshire archaeologist is happy with the setback of the houses from the monument, and the management plan going forward ensures that it will be protected and preserved going forward, which is one of the reasons why the last application was refused, because members had concern about that.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one supplementary to that. Could you please clarify exactly how you're going to ensure that this ancient monument is going to be protected, please?
Yeah, we've going back to 2019. Like I said, one of the reasons why that application was refused was because members had a concern about potential harm to the monument. So when that application was refused, we consulted with Historic England to understand what we could do to overcome that reason for refusal. So we didn't do a pre-application inquiry with the council. We went straight to Historic England and asked them, because ultimately, in addition to requiring full planning permission, at some point down the line, we're also going to need scheduled monument consent as well. So that adds a layer of protection in itself. But like I said, we consulted with Historic England, and it was clear that if we were to overcome the council's second reason for refusal, we would need to provide a heritage management plan which set out the measures that would be the responsibility of the homeowners going forward to ensure that that monument is safeguarded going forward. And although it only relates to that small part, it still ensures management going forward, which may not be in place anywhere else along the monument. We're providing an information board to allow people to appreciate and understand the monument better. There won't be any structures on it. There'll be no tree planting, no landscaping. We're doing as much as we can to ensure that it's safeguarded.
Thank you, Chair. That's all.
Councillor Freeman.
Thank you. So how would you allay concerns of residents who would prefer, as in previous applications and that have been allowed, a 20-metre buffer zone? Certainly it would appear, we have been told tonight, that other developments that have occurred up there have been with sort of given a 20-metre buffer zone between them and the scheduled entrant monument. But you're telling us that there's 15 metres to 5 metres. It seems awfully close to me for something of that historic significance. So how would you allay the residents' concerns who, so like I say, we've had a 20-metre buffer zone on previous developments. Why haven't you considered more of a buffer zone between the development and the monument?
Well, I'm not aware of any 20-metre buffer being agreed on any of the other developments in the local area regarding the monument. The 20-metre buffer that I think was being referred to relates to the council's SPD on landscaping and biodiversity. And what the council would usually require is, as you probably know from recent planning committee meetings, the council would usually require a 20-metre buffer between a plot and a woodland or a significant tree belt. the scheduled monument and the trees on the monument, that's not ancient woodland. Pyett's Hill Copse is, the monument isn't. We've provided a 20-metre buffer between the southernmost plot and the woodland. So we've met that requirement in the SPD. In terms of the distance between the houses and the monument, it varies between 5 and 15 or whatever it is. It does vary. All I'd say is that, firstly, the previous appeal inspector, when he looked at the scheme for 9 houses, was satisfied with the proximity of those houses to the monument, provided there was going to be a safeguarding zone. What we're proposing is further away than those houses on the 9-unit scheme, which the inspector was happy with in that respect. So that's one thing. And like I said, the council's archaeologist has required a setback, and the council's archaeologist is happy with the setback. So we've, in terms of conservation, in terms of the scheduled monument, we've ticked all the boxes we can tick. And I think that the plan we've provided, the management plan, is comprehensive. I think it addresses the previous reason for refusal. I think this is an excellent, logical site in the settlement policy boundary that would provide much needed housing at a time when the council don't have an adequate supply.
Okay.
No further questions. Thank
Councillor Freeman.
you. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a question just on page 117, looking at the site plan. Park Pale, the ancient monument, is that within the curtilage of the gardens or proposed gardens, or is it outside the curtilage of the proposed gardens?
Yes, it's within.
Thank you. Any more questions? No, thank you very much. If you could have a quick wipe down before you leave. Questions to officers? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Can we look at the site plan, please? Okay, can officers please advise which trees or the location of the trees that are going to be removed, please?
Thank you, Chairman, for answering that through you. So there are trees to be removed in plot 4, which is the southernmost of the plots. Just off to the southeast corner of plot 4 there, you can see the circles that overlap the property there. 3 mature oaks just in that corner, so just east of plot 4. Yeah, if you keep going to the east of plot 4. Yes, it's those. You're to the west at the moment. Keep going. Give it a little bit more. That's it. It's those 3 there that are demarked by the red, well, another red dot, but that one, and then the 2 further up. And they're the 3 category B trees that are going, the category B oak trees that are proposed to be removed. The other trees that you see slightly further north are proposed to be removed not to facilitate development, but for arboricultural management reasons. So those are the trees that are proposed to be removed as part of the development, in addition to the ones that are literally just under the plot on the kind of reverse L shape. But there are also landscape conditions requiring a new landscaping scheme, and it's open to members to consider whether that's sufficient or whether they would wish to impose a condition that required there to be no net loss of trees or something similar.
Anyone else? No. Okay, I've got a question. We've got an SPD that we shouldn't. Garden curtilage should be 20 metres from the woodland. And where do we stop with an odd tree or a bank of trees, and where do we start calling it a woodland? And where do we? Because obviously here we've got the gardens. The trees are in the gardens. What's the definition for this SPD of 20 metres? Why is this not being applied in this case? What's the criteria?
Thank you, Chairman. I think there's two reasons for that. And then the first is that there is a recognised woodland to the south of the site, that the southernmost plot is 20 metres beyond. The trees that then run to the eastern boundary of the plot aren't part of that woodland, and therefore haven't drawn any objection from the biodiversity officer or the tree officer. In addition, those buildings that you can see are sited away from the trees to the east and to the woodland to the south. And therefore it's only the gardens that come in closer proximity to them, and the root protection areas. And it's the existing use of the site is garden, so there's no change there in respect of the garden to garden use. So it's the fact that it's not woodland itself, and the separation distance of the actual buildings from the trees that aren't considered to be woodland in their own right.
Okay. RSPD says the garden should be between the garden curtilage and the woodland should be 20 metres, not from the buildings to the... So to the south, how far is it from this woodland to the nearest garden curtilage?
At the moment, it is garden curtilage. So there is no change there. At the moment, it's garden curtilage, and it is proposed to be garden curtilage. So that's the difference between a proposal that you would have here, where there is no change, and a proposal where it might be a greenfield site, for instance, where you're introducing a garden curtilage. So there's no change in that respect. I think that's probably the key message.
Thank you for that. I know where I am with that now. Any more questions? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just using my second question. I'd just like to clarify that while we have an SPD stating 20 metres, I understand about the garden curtilage, which was discussed in your reply to the Chair's question. But I'm just wondering, the fact that we don't have a 5-year land supply, okay, how much weight should we actually put on that SPD? Because obviously they're under the MPPF, okay, because we don't have a 5-year land supply, a lot of our policies are out of date, okay? So I'm just wondering about the presumption of sustained development in respect to the SPD, bearing in mind we don't have a 5-year land supply. I'm just wondering if you could clarify that for me, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that question. So in respect of the 5-year housing land supply position, what that establishes is the policies that are the most important for the decision might be out of date. So in that respect, it's the housing policies that take you to paragraph 11 of the NPPF in the first instance. So the other policies that contained within the local plan, which includes policy EM10, which the SPD is a guidance note in support of, rather than a policy document in its own right, they are consistent themselves with the further policies within the MPPF in respect of tree and biodiversity matters. So that policy and the SPD can be given its normal weight in the overall assessment of a planning application. It's then when you come to consider all of the material planning considerations and you put those into the pot that you're required to do that balance in respect of whether the harms significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Chair. That answers my question.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. Am I not correct in thinking that the ancient woodland, which is registered as a sink, does actually go up to the boundary of plot 4, and that not and although I accept that it's a certain distance from the buildings of number 4, it's on the boundary, and therefore there isn't a 20-metre zone between the residential curtilage and the wood.
Yes, Pyatt's Hill Sink is immediately to the south of the site, but in respect of, I suppose I'll take you back to my previous answer in respect of the existing curtilage of the property is the garden of the existing dwelling, so there is no change in situation in terms of the garden is there and it will be continue to be a garden. So the key material consideration therefore is what is different with this scheme, and in that respect it's a building, it is being built, but that is in excess of 20 metres away, which I think is the main thing that we need to consider.
So can I just make sure I understand that? You're saying that the garden of plot number 4, the boundary of the garden is 20 metres from the sink wood, which is not what I understand.
No, the boundary of the garden of plot 4 runs up to the boundary of the sink in exactly the same. It is the current boundary of the current property that also runs up to the sink. So there is no change of use. It is garden and it will remain garden. The only difference for this application is that there will be a building, but that building itself will be separated by more than 20 metres from the boundary.
If I may just develop that, I understand from the chairman that the SDP states that that the 20 metre zone has to be from the boundary of the garden to the wood, not from the end of the house to the wood.
And yes, that is what I asked, and the answer I got from Greg was that because it is garden now and will of one house, it will become garden of another house. It's gone from garden to garden, so there is no change in the status of that land. At the moment, it's garden to Pyatt's house. It will still be garden after this of number 4. So there is actually no state. So that 20 metre from the curtilage doesn't apply. Is that, I understood you correctly, Greg? Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just tease that out a little bit with Greg as well? So I would assume, and please correct me, that the existing property and its garden existed prior to the SPD being written. And in
yeah, I think the existing property's been in place for well in excess of the period that the SPD's been in place for, yes.
So we have since then established the SPD and established our policy requiring a 20 metre buffer to be on a new garden, on a new curtilage as is, for any development to take place. Therefore, in my mind, I see this as a proposal before us for a new dwelling with a new garden, because it is subdivision of the existing, it is different from the existing. And would I be reasoned in having that thought? Because I think it is a new garden in a new plot. It might be from the existing, but it is new, and we have an application before us this evening to which the SPD can be applicable. And the SPD is in power now, and we have an application before us now, which is new and fresh and is not the original. It is new because it's a 4th plot. It's a brand new plot, seeking to create a new garden for that 4th plot.
Thank you, Chairman. Ultimately, they don't need planning permission to change use from garden to garden, so that need not be part of the proposal. It is part of the proposal, but it need not be. I think the other point to highlight is this application, a previous iteration of this application with a dwelling in exactly the same location was part of the previous application for 3 dwellings. This plot was in the same location as previously, which was after the SPD had been adopted in respect to the 20 metre buffer. I think the advice here is that in respect of officers, there is not a harm that we feel that could be identified, and the application couldn't be refused on that basis. At appeal, there isn't support from landscape or biodiversity or tree officers, and the committee hasn't previously determined to refuse on that basis either. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions? Councillor McCormick.
Just one that's niggling at me really. What is the page 96? What is the archaeological impact? Because the heritage statement says it's slight, but the county archaeologist disagrees. But he then defers to historic England.
The archaeological impact in respect of the proposed dwellings themselves is that dwellings are being erected in an area that there could be archaeological remain, and as a result of that, there would need to be archaeological conditions that are recommended to ensure that any archaeological remains are recorded during the process of the of any development. That's for just pure archaeological terms. In respect of the scheduled ancient monument, I think the impact that's been identified is in respect of the development within the setting of the scheduled ancient monument. That is the harm that's been identified by Historic England, and by, as a matter of fact, there would be development within the setting of the scheduled ancient monument. So there would be an impact as a result of that, but that is observed as being less than substantial, but on the more minor level, and it doesn't form an objection from Historic England or the county archaeologist, and hasn't formed a previous reason for refusal, other than in respect of there not being a management plan, which is now proposed to the acceptable degree by Historic England again. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. In that case, debate. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Gosh, what a complicated plot this is. I have to say that I'm struggling to try and understand the protection of the ditch, okay, on the western side. But however, you know, I have to bow to people like the county archaeologist and also Historic England, and as you know, if they're saying that you know the damage or the impact on the site and the scheduled ancient monuments, you know, it is slight enough to allow this proposal to go ahead, okay, then I'm minded to agree with that, okay. I obviously want to listen to everybody else's you know, comments and debate on that, but should there be no further debate, I would be minded to make a motion, and I'd like, Chair, after everyone's come back, for you to come back to me, okay, if a motion's needed. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner, followed by myself.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be very interested to listen and hear what everybody has to say about this, and I will make up my mind when I get to that point. But I hope the committee will indulge me and allow me to just make one or two comments. And the first comment I'd like to make is that as one can see from the relevant planning history, there have been two applications, both of which have been turned down by DC for a variety of reasons. One of those applications was appealed to the inspector, who denied the appeal, and I think that's fairly significant. What we all as committee members have to decide, I think, is whether we feel that the reasons which were given for turning those two applications down, and the inspector also to not allowing the appeal, have those reasons been dealt with, or in a satisfactory manner, or have they not been dealt with? And I would also point out, purely as a matter of interest, you know, the application for 9 houses, which was turned down, of course, included the demolition of the 2 existing houses, whereas this application for 4 houses does not involve the demolition of the 2 houses, and is therefore, in direct terms of comparison, an application for 6 houses. And the other point I'd like to make is, if it will just bring to everybody's attention, is the inspector also noted the significance of the scheduled ancient monuments that can be defined by its age, survival and condition, and he noted that Historic England had noted that the Pale is a particularly well-preserved example of such an entrenchment and that to understand its significance, it's important that its rural character and its character as a boundary marker in the landscape is preserved. And so I've come back to the fact that two of the houses are within 5 metres of this, and the other two are within 3 metres of this. I know this is not a direct planning issue where this application is concerned, but of course the plan to build 900 houses on the other side of Piatt's Hill, going up towards the sewage plant, of course, does encompass a 20-metre zone being allowed between those 950 houses and Park Pale. So I know that's not relevant to this application, but that does establish that there is an idea that in certain circumstances there needs to be a 20-metre exclusion zone. And I also I find it slightly difficult to understand why the garden at number 4 is not treated in the same way as the garden of the previous house. I mean, if there's an SDP that there must be a 20-metre gap between an ancient woodland and any potential development that surely exists in this case, and it's reasonable to say there isn't such a 20-metre gap, particularly as one could argue that those houses trees which need to be felled, are in fact part of that ancient woodland on which there is a sink. But never mind. And the only other point I'd like to make is that, as I think has been mentioned, Heather Rainbow has sent out this email, and she's involved with Cycle Basingstoke, and she just says that she's unable to attend this particular meeting, but she'd like for it to be brought to the attention that the objections from Cycle Basingstoke to this planning application remain as the same as for the previous applications, which were rejected, and the comments made at that previous meeting from Cycle Basingstoke are still, in her opinion, valid comments. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'll be interested to hear what everybody else has to say, and then I'll struggle to make a decision on how I'm going to vote, because I normally have a natural inclination to support my own parish council in these sort of circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. As I say, I've got me next on the list. I'm looking more than anything at the appeal decision, which was refused. And one of the things that Basingstoke and Dean refused it on was traffic, and that wasn't agreed with by the appeal. The appeal decision was that the traffic was acceptable. So to refuse it on traffic grounds or cycle grounds or that thing, I think would be a very, very dangerous thing to do. One, it could result in an awful lot of cost for the council, but secondly, it wouldn't serve for us to refuse it on something that's going to get almost certainly going to get turned over at appeal. Won't serve anybody, won't serve the residents who are objecting to this any good. The thing that, and Councillor Gardner touched on it, on page 90, there is what the appeal inspector said. Note the Park Pale is particularly well preserved and understand its significance and importance in the rural character. Park Pale is a Saxon deer park boundary, as I understand it, and it's now going to be in the gardens of some houses. Now, how on earth is anybody going to control what people do in those gardens? They're going to mow the lawns, they're going to dig flower beds, they're going to put sheds up. That's what we all do. This is going to get destroyed. I just cannot see any way that this important scheduled monument is going to be, what's the phrase they use, preserved or enhanced when it's in the private curtilage of four gardens? It's just going to get dug up. For that and for that reason, I can't vote for this. I cannot vote for something that is going to wreck a scheduled monument. But that's it from me. Councillor Frost, you had your hand up. You said you were going to propose something. Did I miss somebody else first? Councillor McCormick first.
Yeah, I think it's tricky in as much as the previous reasons for refusal with previous applications have been addressed. And what we're looking at here essentially are new reasons for refusal, but I'm not altogether sure how reasonable an argument we can put together if those reasons weren't put forward in the previous applications.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other before I go back to Councillor Frost? Councillor Freeman.
Thank you. I personally, I share your concerns for the scheduled ancient monument being in private gardens. I really don't see that it's adequate protection for such a valued historic site, and I really think we should be seeking ways to protect this better than this current application. I understand that it's tricky, what with planning laws, etc., but I really don't think this affords anywhere near the level of protection for a scheduled ancient monument that we should be insisting upon.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I note that the ancient monument, I note that Park Pale is in the curtilage of the original gardens in the sense of where the actual boundary line is drawn. However, the new proposal for the new development would create a very close proximity between the existing, so the new dwellings and Park Pale, even more so than we currently have. I note that I think the trees do form an important part of the character of that land, and by their removal do have an impact on the ancient monument. They do actually have a direct relevance, I feel, considering their position to Park Pale, and their removal would therein directly affect it. It would do simply by visual terms, let alone the impact in terms of the landscape and so on. So I'm concerned about the removal of the trees. I think also there is an argument that's been articulated by Historic England and others that there is less than substantial harm, therefore that harm is being done. It isn't that harm is not being done, it's less than substantial. Harm is in fact being done. Therefore, while the previous committees came to a view, we are a new committee making a new decision on a new application with our mind on what has gone historically. But that doesn't stop us coming to our own conclusions based on the application that's in front of us. And I think the assessment of whether harm is real or not comes down to whether or not you believe, or we believe, that the management plan is sufficient to protect the monument in the curtilage of 4 new gardens, in the curtilage of effectively removing those trees, because that will affect it will change the landscape entirely. And then also the point the inspector makes, which is, I think, a fairly important one, that the development will have a suburbanising effect on the appearance and feel of the site. Well, we still are going to have a suburbanising effect on the area of the site because we're still putting dwellings in this location on the site. Therefore, we'll continue to have the suburbanising, in my view. So again, I'm really thinking carefully about the application, but I am not in favour of it at the moment because of the damage I perceive it would do, the harm it would do to the ancient monument.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to everyone's comments around the table, and I do just want to point out another couple of comments in the fact that with plots 4, as I understand it, okay, that was not objected to by the inspector. Okay, so those plots are in exactly the same place now, or proposed to be in exactly the same place now as they were, okay, when the appeal went to the inspector, okay, and there was no comment on the placement of those particular structures. I understand the committee's concerns regarding the the scheduled monument and the pale. Okay, but it says here on page 84 that there's been a management plan provided which has not raised objections. Now, I don't know if anybody is an expert here. I certainly am not. So I have to bow to, the county archaeologist, okay, and also, Historic England. And if they're not raising any objections regarding that, okay, whilst I'm not happy, okay, and I think that the scheduled monument could potentially have some impact, I have to be reassured that Historic England, who are the experts in this, have not raised an objection. So, bearing in mind the fact that the plot 4, okay, and the two southernmost dwellings were not commented on by the inspector, okay, and bearing in mind that there's been a management plan which has not raised any objection, okay, from Highways England, the county archaeologist, and some of the Basingstoke and Dean team, I have to say that even though I still have a little niggle, okay, I think we've done the best that we can, and we have to bow to their superior knowledge. That's why we have these committees. So I would like to propose a motion that we approve, okay, this planning permission, okay, but I would also like a condition regarding the trees that Greg, okay, did allude to earlier, so that every tree that is cut down is replaced by a tree of a similar, okay, breed, for want of a better word, okay, and I want that agreed with the landscape officer before any building actually takes place. Yeah, and I look for somebody in the committee to second. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a proposer with a condition. Are there anybody to second that? There is no seconder. Councillor McCormick.
With a degree of reluctance, I'll second it just so that we get a vote.
Thank you, Councillor McCormick. Greg.
So, okay, if I come back on some of the points that have been made in respect to the said scheduled nature monument. Obviously, the scheduled nature monument, there's been comments that it will be in the gardens of these properties. Well, it's in the garden of the current property. In respect of a management plan, one is proposed to be conditioned for that scheduled nature monument. There isn't a management plan for the current property, for the management and maintenance of that scheduled nature monument. So the requirements of that and what it will deliver, including baseline surveys, temporary demarcation during construction, property boundary fencing to demarcate it, and then a commitment to advice from Historic England, regular inspection of the site, and the installation of an information panel are all kind of elements that would be carried out that aren't carried out at the moment. We've heard that the planning inspector didn't refuse it on the basis, refuse or didn't dismiss the appeal on the basis of the impact on the scheduled nature monument from more dwellings, which were in a more of a cul-de-sac arrangement. Considering that matter could be controlled through condition. Again, it wasn't previously refused by this committee with a similar layout. There was a reason of refusal instead on the basis of a lack of a management plan. That's now come in, and there's no objection to that from Historic England or Hampshire County Council archaeology or indeed officers. There are permitted development rights proposed to be withdrawn from the property, so there could be no erection of sheds, extensions of the properties without or outbuildings or such like, without an application to the council for consideration. Again, that's not the situation with the current property, so sheds, outbuildings could be erected, including in close proximity without need for planning application. There's also the additional control of the need for any works in the vicinity of the ancient monument to need Scheduled Nature Monument consent outside the planning application. In respect of tree removal, any tree removal actually is a benefit to the Scheduled Ancient Monument, although there is obviously a balance to be struck between the retention of trees and the verdant character as well, because it really it would reveal the understanding of the Scheduled Ancient Monument to a better extent. And with all of that, obviously the view is that there is a less than substantial harm to the setting of it, but not to the actual impact of it itself. And that weight's obviously been balanced. Weight's been balanced with the benefits of the scheme, which, as we know, because of our lack of 5-year housing land supply, have to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that and come back on a few of the points that were made. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Craig. It's been proposed and seconded for approval with condition on the trees. Those in favour? Right, I make that 3. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I make that 6. The motion has failed, so we now need a proposer for an alternative motion.
Am I allowed to make a suggestion to Dr. Freeman?
No.
Okay.
In short, I think that comes after. That's not for this meeting. We are where we are, in which case I propose that we refuse this application. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gardner. On conservation grounds, as per the officers, the inspector's report written on page 90 and 91 of, which is that the harm, that it's an ancient monument and that it will neither preserve nor enhance it. I don't personally believe that having it, I think having it in the ownership of one big garden is one thing, having it in the ownership of 4 small gardens where people are pushing their space is a whole different ballgame. I had a seconder in Councillor Gardner, so it's proposed and seconded because it does not preserve or enhance the scheduled monument. Those in favour of refusal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think I make that 7. That application is refused. Greg, could you confirm, please?
Thank you, Chairman. To confirm, that application has been refused as a result of the conservation impact as set out by the planning inspector, and in respect of the impact on the Scheduled Nature Monument with the development not preserving or enhancing it by virtue of the intensification of the proposed development. I'd like to suggest the addition of reference to planning policy in the reason for refusal with reference to policy EM11 of the Basingstoke and Dean local plan, the Heritage SPD and the National Planning Policy Framework. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And in addition to that, the lack of the legal agreement being signed.
Right, thank you. Application number 2, which is Whispering Oak, Gravelly Close, North End. Thank you. We knew that one was going to take a while. Right.
Chairman, is it possible to have those heads like you got on there, up there?
I don't know the answer to that.
My neck has been...
I'm sure.
Okay, perhaps another time.
I can see Bernie at the back shaking her head, so that'll be a no. Okay. So you have to swivel your chair around, David. Okay, Whispering Oak, if we could have Jill Scrivener and Catherine Sadler to the speaker's chairs, please. And if you just wait there whilst the officer introduces the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full application for one two-bed dwelling, parking and landscaping on a parcel of land between 4 Hazelby cottages and 1 Gravelly Close in North End. I'll draw members' attention to the update sheet where we have just clarified there that there's no intention to widen the existing access other than to trim back vegetation to improve visibility. The site lies outside the settlement policy boundary within the AONB and North End Conservation Area. Whilst it is in a countryside location, it is effectively an infill gap and not considered to be isolated. The recommendation is for approval, subject to the completion of a legal agreement in respect of a financial contribution towards off-site affordable housing. This is in light of the recent change to the planning practice guidance, which now, and reference to our policy CM1, where affordable housing for those areas within the AONB on net new dwellings can be achieved. So the recommendations for approval, subject to that agreement and the conditions thereafter.
Thank you, Lisa. You have 4 minutes. The microphone button is a big silver button on the base station. And could you confirm whether you are Jill Scrivener or Catherine Sadler, please?
Hello, I'm Catherine Sadler from Bourne Rural Planning Consultant. Good evening, members of the committee. I am Catherine Sadler, Planning Consultant on this application. We consider that the site is located in a countryside location and has been used by the applicant as an extension of his residential garden at Whispering Oak since 1984, that's 37 years. The definition of previously developed land as set out in the NPPF includes residential gardens within countryside locations. The Court of Appeal judgment in Dartford Borough Council versus the Secretary of State clarified that a garden outside a built-up area can be considered previously developed land. Paragraph 4.72 of the local plan also supports this and states development of previously developed land in the countryside will generally be encouraged. Therefore, this site, being located in a countryside location outside of any defined built-up area and having been used as a residential garden, should be considered previously developed land and would therefore accord with policy SS6 Part A. Of core relevance here, the Council is currently unable to demonstrate that it has a 5-year housing land supply. Therefore, the Council's policies relating to housing delivery in this borough's local plan, policies SS1 and SS6, and main neighbourhood plans are currently considered to be out of date and are afforded limited weight. Planning applications for housing have to be considered against paragraph 11 of the NPPF, which states that where relevant policies are considered out of date, permission will be granted unless the application of policies in the NPPF that promote areas or assets of particular importance provides a clear reason for refusing the development proposed, or any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Your planning officer considers the site to be in a sustainable location and not isolated, as it would be clustered with other houses. It is considered that this modest dwelling assimilates into the landscape setting by its placement between existing dwellings. Your planning officer considers that its lower height would soften its appearance in the street scene. The design of the proposal is considered acceptable in relation to its proportions, roof, design and materials when compared to the size of the plot and its neighbouring properties. There is a dense hedge to the front boundary and existing mature fruit trees behind the hedge, which would be retained, and these would provide screening from the road. The Council's landscape officer has no objection and states that any visual impacts are limited. The Council's Environmental Health Department has no objections. The tree officer has no objection, and the Council's Historic Advisor has no objection and considers that the proposal would preserve the setting of the conservation area. The committee report states that the proposed development is acceptable in terms of design and impact on character of the area in accordance with policies EM1 and EM10 of the local plan. There are no objections from the Highway Authority and no objections from the Council's ecologist. The impact on neighbours was considered at length in the design process. The dwelling has been angled so that its outlook is down the rear garden, and the existing mature boundary hedges and trees would provide screening.
You have 1 minute.
No windows are proposed on the side elevations at first floor level, and at least 20 metres would be retained to all neighbouring properties. It is considered that the proposal would not materially affect the amenities of nearby occupiers. The dwelling would make a contribution to the Council's 5-year housing land supply, and there would be There would also be social and economic benefits resulting from the construction of a new property. The committee report does not highlight any adverse impacts that would be created, and therefore the benefits of the proposal would clearly outweigh any impacts. Planning permission should therefore be granted in accordance with paragraph 11 of the NPPF. The applicant is willing to enter into a Section 106 legal agreement to secure the financial contributions towards affordable housing as highlighted within the committee report. Therefore, I hope you are able to support this planning application today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? No, I have not. Thank you. If you could just give the edge of the table of the microphone and the chair a quick wipe down for the next speaker, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. We have no other speakers on this application, so questions to officers. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, can I just bring up what the Parish Council is objecting to? Because it went from basically no objection to then raising the question. I suppose it's about our credibility as the borough, in that it seems to be that this was the field that you see was owned by Basingstoke Borough Council, and it was sold to the people who had joined the field, and there was a covenant to say that it would never be used for development, and it now seems that that hasn't been implemented or whatever. So I suppose my question is, how does that the parish council is reporting, does it influence this in any way, or are we going to end up maybe suing it ourselves downstream?
Firstly, just to say that it's not a material planning reason for on which the application could be refused. Whether there are or not other valid covenants on the land, that wouldn't preclude this committee from granting planning permission should it wish to do so. And that matter is obviously something that our property and legal services team may look at, but it doesn't sit within the remit of this planning committee, and it's not something my advice is that you would be able to reasonably refuse the application on.
Thank you, Lisa. Any more questions for the officers? In that case, debate. Councillor Harvey.
Just looking at the officer's report and then looking at the landscape proposal, the actual layouts on page 152 and 153, the new dwelling fits with the layout. It has no dramatic difference there. You look at 1, 4 and 4 and 3, and then Hazelby's cottages where it would sit. I see no issue with the argument that's been made by officers in favour of the proposal and their reasons for approval or seeking approval. So on that basis, I'm comfortable with it and would move a recommendation for approval, bearing in mind that that matter that Councillor Faulkner quite correctly raises is going to be a legal matter resolved by solicitors in other places. It's not for us this evening. The application as it stands in front of us is an application I think worthy of approval.
Thank you. Been moved by Councillor Harvey and seconded by Councillor Leeks. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I'll make it 8. And those against? And 1 abstention. Councillor Faulkner's okay. Thank you. That's approved. Lisa.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So, subject to the completion of the legal agreement in respect of the affordable housing provision, the application is approved.
Wonderful, thank you. Item number 3, Mulberry House, Inhurst Lane. And if we could have Mr. Steve Goodwin to the speakers table. We'll wait for Bernie to come back. Yeah. No, Mr. Goodwin. Okay. In that case, I assume Mr. Lassiter and Caroline Down. Sorry, is that Mr. Goodwin to the Speaker's table? Sorry, I thought I got a message you weren't here. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Right. Well, I know we've got Mr. Lassiter. And I assume that's Caroline Daddy. If you can wait whilst the officers introduce it, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 3 seeks planning permission for the extension of an existing garage along with its conversion to a separate 3-bedroom single-storey dwelling house at Mulberry House, Inhurst Lane in Borkhurst. There isn't anything by way of update. The application is before you today in line with the scheme of delegation due to the number of objections received and the officer's recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Speakers, you have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute left.
Chairman, members, thank you for enabling us to speak on the applicant's behalf in relation to this application. The application is for the conversion and extension of the existing garage at Mulberry House. The officer has recommended for approval, so we will not take long in our comments. We studied the letters of objections and acknowledge that the community are fully entitled to their own opinions on the application in line with the NPPF. However, in line with local plan policies and national guidance, we would like to take this opportunity to support the officer's recommendation for approval for the following reasons. The building is already existing, and applying to convert and extend the building under a full application before you is not a breach of a condition. In relation to the development along Inhurst Lane, the site is not an isolated location, which was confirmed recently by an appeal decision for a dwelling along Inhurst Lane, where the inspector stated the proposed dwelling would not be in an isolated location, having regard to the proximity of the site to a group of dwellings in Inhurst Lane and to the services and facilities and public transport connections within the settlement of Borkhurst. The inspector reiterated that due to policies SS1 and SS6 being out of date, that the harm does not significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefit of an additional dwelling towards reducing the housing deficit for the borough. The design has been carefully considered to relate to the existing dwelling on the site. It does not impact the local landscape character of the area. To remind members, the site is not in a landscape designated area such as an AONB. There are no objections from highways or biodiversity, and therefore the application is in line with CN9 and EM4. We'd also like to take this opportunity to advise members that the scheme will be fully in line with current building regulation requirements in relation to ensuring that the dwelling will be fully sustainable with electric car charging points, sustainable drainage, sustainable heating where feasible, and if feasible, sustainable energy in terms of solar panels. The officer has stated 6 reasons for approval, and therefore we ask for members to agree with the officer and grant permission for this application. Many thanks.
Thank you. Questions to the speakers? No? I have no questions, so thank you very much. If you could just wipe the table down, the mic and arms of your chairs. Councillor Poland. You have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here on behalf of the local residents of this ward, of which I'm one of the councillors. Members will probably be aware that this application is for a property that was subject to a planning condition previously, which gave no further planning approvals. This has all been quoted in many of the objection letters from the local residents, so unless you wish me to do so, I don't propose to repeat them all. But I would draw the committee's attention to an application which was submitted on land just virtually immediately opposite the site, which actually was refused permission by the borough, went to appeal and was actually also refused by the inspector. And I quote that This is a single track road virtually. It's narrow, it's unlit, it's not really predominantly useful for a lot more built up traffic, which is likely to be the case and would be the case with Mulberry House or the extension on Mulberry House. I don't think this would be a suitable development, notwithstanding the borough's necessity to produce 5,000 houses in the period that we all have to worry about. It's an incursion into the further incursion into the countryside. I don't think there's any reason whatsoever to actually support this application.
Thank you. If you turn your mic off. Questions for the councillor? No? Thank you very much. If you could have a quick wipe down just before you leave. Thank you. Right. Questions to officers? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that Borghurst Parish Council have objected, okay, and they've said that the site plan is misleading and it does not show evidence of a further dwelling within the curtilage of the site. Is this correct? And if so, can you clarify the outline of the missing building?
To my knowledge, there are no other dwellings within the red line of the application site. The only other dwelling within the ownership of the applicant is Mulberry House, which is in the Blue Land.
Thank you. If there are no others, I've got a couple. One of the objections says it will leave Mulberry House without a garage. Just above and slightly to the east of Mulberry House is another building. Do we know what that is? Yeah.
So I think it's just some residential outbuildings there, as evidenced in that photograph.
Okay, great, because it looked like a Merc building. And the other thing I read in the objections is disturbance to the bat. Has there been a bat survey? Obviously, there's a lot of work going to happen to some of the buildings there.
Sorry, I can answer that one because if you look on page 181, condition 14, development shall be undertaken in line with the recommendations within the preliminary ecological assessment.
So that would include a bat survey. Okay, thank you. Any more questions? I don't see any hands, so debate. And if there's no debate, I will move the officer recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Harvey. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? Full set. Yeah. Thank you. Lisa.
Yep. So the application has been approved as per the agenda.
Right. Okay, item number 4, land at Moorshade Farm, Wildmoor. I'd just like to draw everybody's attention to the update paper on this. I did originally say I would call this in if it was up for approval. Since then I've visited the site and I'm now open-minded on it. So please ignore my previous comments. I say I'm totally unpredetermined. So once again we have Ian Lassiter and Caroline Downey to the table. We could have skipped the white down, couldn't we? And officer, if you could present.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4 seeks planning permission for the erection of 4 dwellings and associated amenity spaces on land at Moorshade Farm, Wildmoor Lane in Sherford on Loddon. From the relevant planning history listed on page 195 of the main agenda, members will note that the site benefits from permission for the conversion of an existing agricultural barn to 4 residential units under Class Q, Part 3 of the General Permitted Development Order. That barn is to be demolished as part of the proposed development before you today. If I could also draw your attention to the update paper, it's advised that a corrected site location plan has been received and condition 1 is therefore amended to include this plan. As a result of this plan, it's also clarified that the site area extends to 0.49 hectares. Also, just to confirm that the call-in request has been withdrawn, notwithstanding that the application is before you today, in line with the scheme of delegation due to the number of objections received and the officer's recommendation for approval. And lastly, it's advised that agreement has been received on behalf of the applicant for the recommended pre-commencement conditions as listed within the agenda.
Thank you. Speakers, you have 4 minutes, so we'll warn you when you have 1 minute left.
Chairman, members, thank you for enabling us to speak again on this application at Mulshay Barn. The site at Mulshay Barn has an existing approval through a prior notification of proposed change of use from agricultural building to C3 dwelling houses. As the report states, the permission enables the applicant to convert the building to 4 dwelling houses and therefore is a material consideration for this current application that you see before you. This application seeks to improve and extend permission by creating a courtyard setting with an attractive, well-designed buildings that look to improve the visual amenity of the setting rather than leaving an unattractive barn in its location. It is important to note that the application is in line with policy CN3 in relation to the housing mix. There are two 2-bedroom units, 1 3-bedroom unit and 1 4-bedroom unit. The Parish Council initially considered that the barn in question was adjacent to a listed farmhouse, Mulshay House. However, this is not the case. The listed barn is located over 500 metres away on Wildmoor Lane. In regards to access is down a farm track that serves the existing farmhouse, Mulshay Farmhouse, and has been in use for farm traffic. The other main objector was the landscape officer, yet the principal planning officer on the application acknowledges the benefit of removing the singular barn that monopolises the site, sitting awkwardly with the current farmhouse. Its removal is considered to be a benefit to the scheme, and the new scheme before you will be more harmonious with a rural farmstead. It is further considered that the scheme would represent a high level of design that would respond positively to the local landscape and distinctiveness. Furthermore, we'd like to advise members that the scheme will be fully in line with current building regulation requirements in relation to ensuring that each dwelling will be fully sustainable with electric car charging points, sustainable drainage, heating, and where feasible, sustainable energy in terms of solar panels. To conclude, the development would add 4 new dwellings of high quality to the housing shortage, which therefore represent a benefit to the borough and a cause of the objectives set out by the National Policy Framework. We urge you to support the officer's recommendation and look to approve the application, and thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you. Questions to the speakers? I see no hands, so I've got 2. 1, can you tell me the combined square meterage of the buildings that you're proposing go on site? Are they greater or lesser than the square meterage of the barn that's got the extent planning permission for conversion?
So the approved scheme, the approved scheme for the conversion under the Class Q conversion was 733 square metres, and the GIA of this is 843 square metres, so it is actually a tiny bit larger.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, how much higher is the highest building than the existing barn?
I think we'll need to defer to officers on that because we don't have the plans with us.
We'll come to that under questions to officers in that case. Any more questions for the speakers? No. Thank you very much. If you can have another wipe down. Questions to officers, and obviously I've already got one in the pipeline.
with regard to the heights, I'm afraid I don't have that information in front of me to be able to advise what the heights of the proposed buildings are compared to the barn.
Could you repeat that, please, Gemma?
Sorry, I don't have that information in front of me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ganesh.
Thanks, Chair. My question is to the office is about countryside services recommendation. What are there any conditions recommended? Is that still in place?
Thank you. Yeah, so they did suggest some conditions which are listed at the end of the report. I think the condition is in relation to a traffic management plan. Let me just double check the condition number for you. Condition 11. And then there's also some informatives added at the end of the recommendation, just to make the applicants aware of the needs to, to rectify any damage that might be caused to the surface of the public right of way and so forth.
Thank you.
Your microphone's still on. Yeah. Any more questions to the officers? No? In that case, debate. Okay. I've got a huge advantage over everybody on this. I'm sure I'm the only one that's visited the site. And it's got permitted development rights to convert the existing barn, which is steel framed and corrugated concrete asbestos cladding and concrete block down the bottom. It's pretty ugly as it stands. And I think if we can go to the pictures of what the extent planning permission is, that's the back one. That is what we will finish up with if they carry on with a permitted development. And if we can go to the pictures of what they're proposing, that is what we will get if tonight's proposal goes through. To my mind, I think that's more acceptable. I'll be interested to hear what anybody else has got to say. Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. I would be in mind of supporting the approval.
Thank you. Is that a proposal? Is that a proposal?
Yes, if I may.
Okay, thank you. We have a proposer. Do we have a seconder? Councillor McCormick. Proposed and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 8. I make that 8. I make that 8. And those against? 1. That's approved. Gemma?
Thank you. Just to confirm, the application is approved, subject to the conditions listed in the main agenda and as updated by the update paper.
Thank you. Item 8. 5? Sorry, 5. Yeah. I need... when I said it, I thought, that doesn't sound right. I'll buy some new glasses by next time. Item 5. Thank you. Land southwest of Castle Cottages, Newtown Common. And if we could have the first speaker to the chair, which is Tony Webb. If you could just wait there for a few minutes whilst the officer introduces the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 seeks planning permission for the erection of a detached 4-bedroom dwelling on land to the southwest of Castle Cottages, Newton Common. Members will note from the relevant planning history listed on page 240 of the main agenda that the site benefits from outline planning permission for the erection of a dwelling with hard and soft landscaping works, and this previous permission was allowed on appeal in February 2019. Nevertheless, members are reminded that this application before you tonight is not seeking approval for reserved matters associated with that previous outline application, and that this is an application for full permission as a standalone application. If I could also draw your attention to the update paper, a further representation has been received from Councillor Isaac, which is set out for you in full there, along with some photographs in Appendix 1. It is also advised that on page 250 of the main agenda, there's a slight error referring to Mulberry House when discussing access and impacts on public rights of way. Notwithstanding this, the footpath numbers cited within the report are correct. The update also includes an additional condition relating to details to manage surface water drainage, which was omitted from the main agenda. The application has been brought before you tonight in line with the schema delegation due to the number of objections received and the officer's recommendation for approval. And you will also note that consultation responses from the Hampshire County Council Rights of Way team and the Rambler Association are still outstanding at this time. And as such, it's recommended that the application be approved as set out within the main agenda, subject to no new material matters being raised by those consultees.
Thank you, Gemma. Mr. Webb, you have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute left. And it looks like you found the microphone button already.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. I speak as the Chairman of Newtown Parish Council on behalf of the Parish Council. We've already commented on both the outline and full planning applications for this site, and we feel our position in this respect remains valid. However, the Parish Council has to take a broader view from those clearly expressed by neighbours of the proposed site. We accept that the comprehensive report to the Development Control Committee has recognised many of the points raised and thanks the LPA for their diligence. We also accept that a house of some description will be built on the site, but we remain concerned that as the DCC has been unable to visit the site, it is very hard for the committee to appreciate the likely impact of this new build on both the locally listed village hall and on neighbouring houses. Equally, it is most regrettable that this hearing has not been postponed to allow such a visit to take place. I would again emphasise that this dwelling is much larger and higher than the one that was approved by the inspector on appeal. One only has to look at the construction associated with White Cottage nearby to see how unsuitable and unsightly that is to be equally concerned about this development. The report to the DCC on visual aspects inevitably makes subjective judgments, which the DCC itself might well view differently if given the chance. Whilst knowing that the committee must remain focused on this application, it is equally valid for the Parish Council to look at the wider picture. One small area of Newtown is currently facing the impact of 7 new houses: White Cottage, Castle Cottage and Newtown Court Farm, itself a total of 5 large houses. There can be little doubt that if all these developments are approved, either by the LPA or on appeal, the character and attractiveness of the area will be significantly altered and will contrast badly with the much older Victorian and Edwardian cottages that surround it. Within the same area, there exist 12 period dwellings and 3 later designs, most of which are semi-detached. The current cohesion of style will be ruined by 7 large 4, 5 or even 6 bedroomed detached modern houses. Possible future builds will see an increase of about 50% within one small area of Newtown Village. In this context, for the Newtown Court Farm proposal, the architectural specialists claim that attention to detail will result in a visually attractive development that adds to the overall quality of the area and is sympathetic to neighbouring properties. The Parish Council strongly disagrees with this bland and misleading assessment.
You have 1 minute.
Our other concern for the community is that all these developments are high-cost, large homes that will almost certainly be out of financial reach for the children of any residents who might prefer to remain close to the place of their childhood. The underlying motive in at least 3 of these applications is to make money, not to serve the interests of the local community. Section SS6 of the Basingstoke and Dean local plan rules recognises this undesirability, but has been overridden because of the appeal rulings from the Inspectorate, justified by the case law governing the classification of previously developed land. This seems to be, to us, a great shame and effectively removes much of the protection that rural communities have every right to expect, both in this case and for all similar future applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And questions to the speaker? No, I see no hands up. Thank you very much. If you can just have a quick wipe down of the microphone button and the edge of the table. And if we could have Mrs. Pilkington, Mr. Lloyd and Mr. Roskill. That makes life so much easier. Okay, you have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
I am Jo Pilkington. I'm representing the village hall and the local residents. The property already has outline planning permission for a chalet-style bungalow, which this new proposal is for a large 4-bedroom detached executive house. We would like to object to the height of this proposed building. The building itself is approximately the same height as other properties in the area, but the problem is that the building site, the level, is 3 metres higher than any other ground area, meaning the base of the building is 3 metres higher than the base of other buildings, giving the new build an effective height of 10 metres, leaving it towering above the other houses and dwarfing the single-storey village hall. This increased height is going to severely and negatively impact the privacy of the occupants of 4 and 3 castle cottages. The height advantage is going to mean the windows and even the glass ground floor doors are going to look straight over the gardens, bedrooms and living areas of castle cottages. This is a completely unacceptable invasion of privacy. The single-storey village hall will be completely overwhelmed by the new house. On some of the pictures you can actually see the landfall towards a thatched cottage, but I can't tell you which picture it is. We accept the outline planning permission has been granted for the chalet bungalow. We would like the committee to rethink the size of this house. A smaller house would cause a less of invasion of privacy issue. A 4-bedroom house with a large area of patio and parking will reduce the area of land available to soak up rainwater. Heavy rains usually overwhelm the road drains along the C45, a quite dangerous road that sweeps around a sharp bend as it then goes down a steep hill. Reducing the area of absorptive surface will lead to increased frequencies of water rushing freely down the roadway, leading to further dangerous driving conditions. Debris, stones and gravel swept onto the road during these events also make the road more hazardous to other road users, and it's quite a popular cycle road. Again, a smaller house with a smaller parking and patio areas would cause less of a problem. I'd also like to draw your attention to another matter not covered at all by the planning officer's report. A 4-bedroom house could be assumed to be occupied by 5 people, each using in the region of 110 litres of water a day. There are no mains drains in the area and no sewage system. This water will all be treated by a sewage treatment plant and then can be released into a drain, waterway or soakaway. The only option open to a house in this particular position is to release this water into a soakaway. As mentioned earlier, this house is on higher land, higher than any of the other surrounding houses. The water table in the area is extremely high and numerous springs pop up in gardens and even in the middle of the C45. Water coming from this new house will travel downhill, taking the path of least resistance and may appear in gardens or on the road or under houses. It is not known what state any foundations the village hall may have or in. It is known that the 16th century listed building thatched cottage does not have any foundations. Water running beneath such a structure would be very damaging. A smaller house with a low occupancy would produce less treated water and so less would be released into the hill. I would remind the committee that any foreseeable damage caused by negligence would be the responsibility of the committee, as found in the cases of the Donoghue and Stevenson and the Cambridge Water Company versus the Eastern Counties Leather plc. In summary, we are objecting to the height of the building and the subsequent loss of privacy, the excess water on the road, and would like to be assured that any damage to any other properties as a result of the water from this property
You
will
have
be
1
the
minute.
responsibility of the developer. I'd also like to mention that these little access tracks are very narrow, and if you've got more traffic trying to access the building area when it's inhabited, it's going to obstruct the traffic trying to get off the C45. And I've seen accidents where people have had to be cut from their cars because they've had near misses on that road. I can't see that increasing the traffic with 3 or 4 cars living there is necessarily a good thing. But thank you for your attention. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions to the speaker? No, I don't see any hands up. Thank you. If you could just wipe the table down and the microphone button. Thank you. And if we could have Ms. Fledger. You have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute left.
Good evening. I'm the agent for this application. The application site is located within the main cluster of properties in the settlement of Newtown Common. The site has outline planning permission for a detached dwelling that was granted on appeal in August 2019. The outline planning permission approved matters of access and layout. The applicants wish to move the access further from an existing oak tree, as well as moving the dwelling further into the site to provide a more usable parking area to the front. This application therefore seeks full planning permission for a detached dwelling. The outline planning permission does, however, remain extant and could be implemented subject to the approval of remaining reserved matters. The inspector determining the extant planning permission describes Newtown Common as a random scattering of dwellings which do not have any singular character in terms of size of dwelling, relationship to access tracks, size of plot, or story height. The inspector also found that the application site was bigger than a number in the immediate vicinity. The dwelling subject to this application has been designed to appear as a main dwelling with a single-storey extension to the rear. The two-storey part of the dwelling would be just 1 metre wider than that already approved and 1.7 metres deeper. The single-storey element would extend a further 4.2 metres, consistent with what would ordinarily be allowed under permitted development rights, with such rights proposed to be removed by way of condition. The dwelling would be 2 storeys in height, although the first floor windows would be set within the eaves, minimising the scale and bulk of the dwelling. Whilst the chalet-style property was referred to on the appeal plans, this would have also been 2 storeys, at least in part, and from the appeal decision, appeared to have little bearing on the inspector's decision to approve the outline planning permission, with him referring to a lack of character when it comes to storey height. A private rear garden would be provided, 13.5 metres in depth and the width of the site, and the property would be in excess of 40 metres from Castle Cottages to the north. As acknowledged in your officer's report, the dwelling would be of a high quality design with feature brickwork and a balanced appearance. The dwelling would be well screened by existing mature vegetation, particularly along the west. Due to intervening distances, levels and existing vegetation, the dwelling would not be seen immediately in conjunction with any other property, but would rather complement the existing scattering of dwellings. The previous inspector raised no concern regarding impact on the Grade 2 listed village hall, and the dwelling would not be so significantly greater in scale to alter this conclusion, with mature vegetation between the dwelling and village hall largely screening the dwelling. In summary, the application relates to a site with extant planning permission for a detached dwelling. The inspector's decision, for which made it clear that the proposed layout was fully compliant with local plan policies relating to design and landscaping. The proposed dwelling would be appropriately sited within the relatively large plot, providing a garden 13.5 metres deep and retaining a distance in excess of 40 metres between the proposed property and the closest properties to the north. Whilst the dwelling is larger than that approved on appeal, the increase in height, width and depth would not result in a dwelling so different in character that the inspector's conclusions can no longer be considered relevant. The scale and design of the dwelling would complement the existing mix of surrounding properties and would therefore be in keeping with the character of the surrounding area. The applicant is agreeable to conditions requiring details of landscaping, an arboricultural method statement and a construction method statement.
You have 1 minute.
And it is requested that planning permission is granted in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions to the speaker? No questions to the speaker. Thank you. And you're already in the white then. Thank you. Councillor Isaac. You have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute left. Microphone, please.
Good evening, Chairman and councillors and officers. As one of the ward councillors representing Newtown Common in the Evingar ward, I am supporting residents and the parish council in objecting to this proposal. As the photos councillors have been provided reveal, this application, if allowed, will have a significant detrimental impact on the much loved, cherished, locally listed Newtown Village Hall and also on neighbouring homes. And it's for this reason that I've proposed that there should be an adjournment of this matter, and that I think it would be beneficial if councillors had the opportunity of visiting the site and understanding the impact of this. Decisions by members of this committee have permanent and significant consequences for the look, feel and character of small rural hamlets such as Newtown, and it is important, I think, that councillors fully understand the topography and built form relationships in order to reach a fully informed conclusion. I will set out the grounds for my opposing this application, but I'd start by saying that I accept that the site has permission for a dwelling as a result of the appeal decision of 24th of June 2019. This approved an outline application for a detached chalet bungalow, not the two-storey, four-bedroom house now in detail before DC. I believe that the inspector's support for a low-rise minor residential development is not being respected in the detailed application proposed. A larger, taller building on the site will have detrimental impacts on what is effectively the heart of the village. It's not in keeping with the character of the village. The village in this part is largely unchanged for over 60 years. And this is compounded by the topography of the area, with this site being a relatively high point. A two-storey house would be both visible and look down on the village hall and existing dwellings, for castle cottages in particular. Councillors will understand, I believe, why the setting and architecture of the village hall make it an Edwardian gem, so loved, used and valued by villagers, and why it should be protected for the future, while still permitting an appropriate low-rise new home that would be better screened from view. And the hedging there that you see is mixed, so it's deciduous and evergreen. But of course, it could be cut down, and
you have 1 minute. That
would have a very detrimental effect on the relationship between the new house and the village hall. It seems to me that our officers do recognise the planning sensitivities and overdevelopment risks of allowing this development. The proposed condition restricting permitted development rights to control any future development or additions is a case in point. Also, the recommendation to require obscure glazing to certain windows overlooking neighbouring homes. So, for these reasons, I would request that you would make a more fully informed decision by visiting the site and then considering it further.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor Isaac? I've got one. If we could have the site plan up, or location plan, which is that one. I'm a little bit confused. Can you explain the layout of this? Because it's described as being in the back garden of number 4, yet the access road seems to come past it, which would imply the front garden. Can you try and make any sense of the layout for me?
Well, yes, this plot is I'm sure in the past was the garden of 4 castle cottages, and the proposal is to access it. If you look at that map and you treat that as north-south, then the access would be to the southern end of the plot. Does that answer your question, Chairman?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much. Anybody else got any questions? No. Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Councillor Harvey. After. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Isaac. If you can wipe the edge of the table and the microphone button down, please. Questions to officers. Councillor Harvey.
Before we get into questions for officers, members and the parish have asked us whether we should consider a deferment to actually have a site visit. And I note that officers have been suggesting that that might be possible in the future to do that. So before we actually go to the next stage of the process, should we not perhaps consider whether we might want to defer this application to do that? And then when we come back to committee, of course, we would pick up at the point of questions to officers having done that site visit, rather than do the questions and then have no ability to do that following a site visit. Get it in the right order sort of thing. If we should consider that first, I think maybe that might be logical.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. It's not often that I'm in full agreement with Councillor Harvey. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. But I agree. I think this is one of the planning applications that would benefit from a site visit. However, a question to officers is, or even to you, Chair, is when are site visits going to be allowed, and when would this be deferred to? But I would like to second the motion.
Site visits are back on next month. The minibus is already booked. So that's the answer to the question. And presumably we could get it onto that for next month's agenda. That's the situation. I'm fully supportive of deferring it. So I take it Councillor Harvey proposed it for deferment and Councillor Frost has seconded that. So those in favour of deferment pending a site visit. And I make that 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. And those against? And abstentions, therefore 2. Wonderful. Item is deferred. Officer, can you probably have to confirm that? Thank you.
Yep. Application deferred for a site visit, and as you said, Councillor Robinson, I think that the date is the 3rd of September for that, with return to September's meeting.
Item 6, which is land adjacent to former sawmill, Newbury Road, Headley. It's a PIP, and appreciate there are a couple of new members on here, so I will ask one of the officers just to run through PIP, and also item 8 is the technical consent that comes after a PIP, so we'll cover both of those in one, so everybody knows exactly where they are and what we can do and what we can't do with these.
Thank you, Chairman. It's an application at land adjacent to the former sawmill, Newbury Road, Headley. The proposal, as you say, is a permission in principle for the erection of 9 dwellings and associated work. So if I could take members to page 268 of the main agenda. And under the title Background, it refers to the route for obtaining planning permission that was brought in June 2018, allowing a 2-stage approach, the first being an application for permission in principle, and then only where that is approved can an application be followed by an application for technical details consent. What that does is breaks up into 2 separate distinct processes. The first, as it sets out there, this is a PIP application, which is a permission in principle application, establishes whether a site is suitable in principle for residential-led development. However, the scope of any PIP and therefore consideration of it is limited only to location, land use and amount of development. Conditions can't be imposed, so the only thing that is being considered is the principle of development and nothing else. And the report's attempts to be set out on that basis. In terms of the reverse situation and the subsequent application, if a planning permission in principle is agreed, there would be then a subsequent application for technical details consent, which doesn't consider the principle of development at all. It's not a matter for consideration. It, I suppose that's what it says on the tin. It considers the technical details of a subsequent application. So things like the layout, appearance, scale, landscaping, any survey work necessary to establish levels, etc. So it's very much a two-stage process, and here we have a planning application for permission in principle, but planning permission wouldn't exist until you have both of those in place. Hopefully that gives you a useful overview of what a permission in principle is. In respect to the update paper, there is no update for this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Greg. If we can have Mr. and Mrs. Herson to the Speaker's chairs. No? Not here. In that case, we have, no, in that case, Mark Lytle to the Speaker's chair. Greg, is it?
No, thank you, Chair. I introduced the what the application, or where the application was, and what it was for at the beginning prior to the PIP explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lytle, you have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you very much, Chairman. My name's Mark Lytle. I represent the applicant. As your officer has said, this is simply seeking planning in principle. The technical details consent, which would follow, subject to approval of this application, will consider design, housing mix, parking, highways, trees, biodiversity, and the usual list of development management considerations. The adjacent 9 houses, which are under construction, have been designed to accord with the requirements of the council, and this can be repeated in respect of this development with the addition of ground source heat pumps and electric charging points for cars. Now, the site lies in a designation where ordinarily housing would be resisted, save for the exceptions listed in planning policies. It's very helpful in the committee report that the council acknowledges a housing land supply shortfall, and this has led to recent permissions immediately adjoining this application site, and includes the appeal decision at Broadacres for a dwelling, and more recently in July of this year, 4 houses east of Springfield. Each of these applications considered the location, landscape impact, and that the sites are reasonably sustainable, being close to settlements. As such, the location has been found to be suitable for housing. The stated reasons for withholding planning permission or in principle for this proposal, and as set out in the officer's report, relate to the rural location and perceived effect on the landscape, and the lack of a biodiversity assessment. In assessing these, it must be borne in mind that the landscape is not of any special designation, and it falls away from the access road. It is not, for example, AONB, where the weight afforded to it would be very much more significant. It follows that having regard to the housing land supply shortfall, the harm when weighed against other policies of the development plan and the benefits of housing must fall in the planning balance in favour of the grant of permission. Plainly, the permission for what now exists for 14 houses here will all have a visual impact on the landscape, and that cannot be ignored. Indeed, in the interest of consistency, this application should be considered in the same way and granted planning permission. The matter of biodiversity assessment does not need to be considered at the PIP stage and can properly be assessed at the detailed stage at a later date. It should also be noted that there will be substantial SIL payments from this development, and these can be used on local projects.
You have
such
1
as
minute.
The Headley Recreation Ground. Clearly, there is a wider public benefit of the houses, and weight should be afforded to this. I would urge your committee to grant planning permission in principle for the 9 houses. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Lytle? No? Thank you, Mr. Lytle, and you're already doing the wipe down. Councillor Rattigan. Evening, Councillor Rattigan. You have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee, for looking at this application. I must commend the officer for doing so much to have a refusal notice on this. He must have worked particularly hard to achieve this. It is a PIP. Let's just be honest about it. Let's look at his reasons for refusal. Inappropriate residential development in the back greenfield site in a countryside location. If we move to page 285, you can see that 9 houses already been approved on this former sawmill site, and the addition of these houses are going to make absolutely no impact at all. And yet, it is the right place for a discrete development. When I was getting ready for tonight's meeting, I've picked up the Ashford Hill and Headley Neighbourhood Plan, the submission dated the 21st of June this year. This is the reason that I think this should be approved. It notes, and this yet hasn't been approved, but is in the process of doing so, and we need to support neighbourhood plans. It notes that this parish has an ageing community, and any property development in the parish should reflect this trend. New housing should be predominantly of 2 and 3 bedroom units to encourage young families into the area and older residents to downsize while remaining within the area. Now, let's be honest, we all want sustainable development. This was within a mile of Greenham Common Trust land and the thousands of jobs that are up there. It's within 300 yards of Four Kingdoms. It's got a bus service. It has a community shop in Headley, unlike Ashford Hill, and is what we should be moving forward. The villages do not want large-scale developments. And what they say in page 51 of this paper, many residents are against new houses in the parish. Yeah, reasonably so. But they want them on brownfield sites and small infilled sites. This is the demands of the people of this parish. Now, this site is ideally chosen for this. It abuts a small development that's already being brought forward, and you as a committee moved it from 3+1 to 9 to reduce the size to be more appropriate for the people of Headley. You've already made that decision. I'm asking you to once again make the decision that will allow small housing, because that's what the developer has brought forward in the past, to continue there and to bring through 9 small developments at a detailed stage when that happens. And of course, the biodiversity piece will then be covered off. I genuinely believe this is the right...
1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. I believe this is the right site. And if you go to page 284, you will see where Springfield is. And the site opposite the development has already been approved for 4 large dwellings. The idea that this development here will change the nature and character of this area is for the birds. And frankly, I hope that we can bring this forward, because this is the sort of discrete development that this parish demands and is demanding right now when the neighbourhood plan goes for the referendum in only a few weeks' time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor Ratty and Councillor Harvey.
And Ken, I appreciate you referencing the new neighbourhood plan that's been created, but in the officer report, we've got Headley Parish Council giving us considerably detailed objections to this, and they go through over-urbanisation of the rural setting, lack of amenities, nature conservation, highways concerns, and they also cite the neighbourhood plan as a reason to reject. How would you respond to those particular issues?
Thank you, Paul. That's very good of you to do that. Obviously, the objection was in before the decision of the people, because this consultation came in after the objection. So the highways issue is not an issue, because Hampshire Highways have not objected to this in any way at all. Overdevelopment, well, let's be honest about it. It's only overdevelopment if the houses were likely to be large. They are not going to be. There will be the right mix. This committee ensured that previously, and I hope that they would do so again. And as for a change of character, I cannot substantiate that, because there are already houses going within that area. We've already got 9 being built and 4 going to be across the path. I genuinely believe that this is the right place. And when you look at the character of Headley, there are other developments like Green Acres and Green Evergreen that are there, Swaits Meadow, Holly Bush, which are all small discrete developments that have integrated well. What the parish do not want are large-scale developments like the 50 that are being proposed at Thornford Road. Thank you.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rattigan, I would just like to know where the houses have currently been developed. That, as I understand it, was a brownfield site. Is this new development a brownfield site, please?
Obviously, when a sawmill was on the site and the application previously came in, it was for where the building of the sawmill was. Now, we all understand that sometimes brownfield means that the land is used for other things, and this was used for the logs to be situated before being cut previously. In my view, that substantiates the SS6 and the brownfield site designation.
Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions? No? Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. If you can do a quick wipe down on the table and mic and such like. Questions to officers? Okay, I'll start. Could somebody just... Sorry, I didn't see it. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Page 271, highways concerns. Now, I note on the following page, I believe it is, no objection in principle, but further information required from Hampshire Highways. I note also that we've already got 9 houses going in on the same site. This is doubling the number. Very concerned to read about 3 accidents within close proximity access, 2 of which were serious and 1 was slight. One of the serious collisions was directly at the access point. So what further information is required by the Highways Authority? And also, what scope is there to insist on junction improvements, given that there has been an accident and 2 further accidents in close proximity in the context of a permitted in principle development?
Thank you, Chairman. The page 281 under parking / on-site manoeuvres sets out the local highway authority has not raised an objection, subject to, and it's got then the following, and it lists the information that local highway authority would wish to see, but that would be at the technical details concern. They've got no objection to the quantum of development in respect of the principal stage and the use of the access. So their position would be that there's no, in principle, harm to highway safety as a result of the proposed development.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to look at the first paragraph for the reasons of refusal, please, officers. And halfway through the paragraph, we have policies EM1 and EM10, okay, being cited as reasons for refusal. But my understanding is that this is a PIP, and therefore a lot of the decisions, such as the ones equating to policy EM10, which is delivering high quality housing, okay, are actually decided at the next stage. Okay, so I'd just like to know, why have we put in EM10 at this stage when it's not to be considered?
Thank you, Chairman. The ability for landscape impact to be considered at the permission in principle stage is...
Sorry, can I just cut in there? I wasn't discussing EM1, I was discussing EM10, okay, which is about delivering high quality housing. That's that I don't see as being relevant, and I'd like you to explain why it's there as a reason for refusal when with a PIP, okay, a lot of the details of high quality housing, okay, is discussed at the second stage. EM1 deals with the landscaping.
Thank you, Chairman. Part 2 of Policy EM10 under 2A discusses proposals that comply with local character and distinctiveness in an area that's valued by local communities whilst allowing for innovation where appropriate. So it's that element of policy EM10 that's picked out to complement, I suppose, policy EM1. But if members don't feel that policy EM10 is appropriate part of the refusal and prefer to rely on purely EM1, then that's within members' gift.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to bring members' attention to delivering high quality development. The officer has said that it's effectively is 1A, okay, contribute towards the provision of neighbourhoods and places for work and leisure that are well connected. I actually believe this particular site, that's okay, I'm coming on to your section 2A, okay, and 2B in a minute.
Councillor Frost, it's questions, not debate.
Okay.
Good question, please. Thank you. Any more questions for the officers? Thank you. In that case, debate. Okay, I'll start it off. Bearing in mind what you said at the beginning of this, so explaining to us what PEP was, that its location, I'm a bit confused as to how this actually fails, because as I understand PEP, it's could houses be built on this site, and how, and give or take how many. And looking at the scale of the development, 9 houses on a site of this site, it's perfectly doable. So I'm a little bit confused as to why this one's being refused. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what other people think. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to clarify, please, okay, your use of section or use of policy EM10, okay, when we have 1A, which I believe this site does contribute to the provision of neighbourhoods and places for work. Okay, the actual place of Headley is very, very close to Green and Common Trust, as the leader stated. Okay, it's within a mile or so. So therefore, there are plenty of employment opportunities. It's also very close to Kingsclear, okay, which has a couple of industrial sites of its own. So again, there are economic opportunities there, and also it's very close to Newbury, where there are even more opportunities, even though it is over the border. Okay, I also like to come down to section 2B, that you provide a high quality amenity for occupants of developments. In reality, that doesn't come into this stage of the PIP. We are surely looking at just whether this can be used, aren't we?
Greg.
At permission in principle stage, it's effectively what you're deciding is whether the site is capable of being developed. So whether there would be any development here that could be accepted in line with the permission in principle. And the officer's advice here is that the landscape impact of any development of 9 dwellings would be so harmful that in landscape terms, that it's not capable of being acceptable in principle, because you wouldn't ever accept technical details consent for 9 dwellings. In respect of EM10, as I said, if members feel that the proposal is harmful to the landscape and want to refuse it solely on EM1 without reference to EM10, and that's within members' gift. But the kind of in addition to policy EM10 2A that I referred to, Part C does also reference having due regard to the density, scale, layout, appearance, architectural detailing, materials and history of the surrounding area and the relationship to neighbouring buildings, landscape features and heritage assets as well. And very much the character of this lane is sporadic dwellings. Yes, there have been permissions granted recently, but those aren't, for want of a better word, backland type developments like this is. So the concern is that this development has a harmful impact, would have a harmful impact to the landscape character, such that the site couldn't or shouldn't be developed. Obviously, again, members may feel differently from the officer recommendation. And I suppose the same is true in respect of the second reason for refusal on biodiversity matters. If, for example, this site were a triple SI, which it's not, but if it were a triple SI, the members might be right in saying, well, there's a very reasonable likelihood that that there are protected species on site here, and any development would be harmful to them, so we would never be able to develop it. We would never be able to grant technical details consent because it would be so harmful to that triple SI. So there would be an in-principle problem as a result of the biodiversity situation. Now, the biodiversity officer here is objecting because there aren't any surveys that confirm or confirm the presence or absence of protected species on site. And when you consider the proximity to ponds to the west and to the north, the site itself, which is obviously undeveloped, the trees around the perimeter of the site and the wooded area to the southeast, there's a reasonable likelihood of there being protected species on site that would, if they're of if you don't know what their population is, you can't say that you could grant a permission in principle because it might just not be possible to ever develop that site. So that's the reason for the second reason for refusal, because of the lack of information on that to confirm the acceptability of the site to be developed on biodiversity grounds.
Councillor Freeman.
I totally agree with the officer's refusal. If you're looking at things here like the lack of amenities within the actual area, the nature conservation, a small development such as has already been permitted is fine, but any more houses are going to overload what's already there. They haven't got the infrastructure to cope with it. It could seriously impact the environment, and just that extra 9 houses really just could ruin the entire area for species. We've got bats along the Enbourne River. I'd be minded to totally approve the officer's refusal here. I think it's just too much on such a site. What we've got is enough. I don't think there needs to be anything more on there. It might need tidying up with the looks of, where the old sawmill was, maybe a nice landscaping, but I don't think it's suitable for any more houses, given the amount of concerns, nature conservation, the lack of amenities, and also the traffic situation around there. I don't think it's a good place for development.
Yeah. Are you moving for the officer's recommendation?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hussey, you had your hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I've listened very carefully and I've come to the conclusion there's too much uncertainty. And it's that uncertainty which makes you want to stay safe and go with the officer's recommendation. There's a lack of information, even for supporting this, which is in principle. I was very much taken by the words just uttered by Greg, Officer Chapman. And I think he's hit the nail on the head. It's the uncertainty. To vote in favour of this application rather than for refusal would be a gamble because of that lack of information. So I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in my limited experience with PIPs, the whole issue is the fact there is very little information. I know the area reasonably well because it borders my ward, and it has tremendous amount of commuter traffic between Newbury and Basingstoke, and then up to Aldermaston, where thousands of people work. So perhaps it's slightly unkind to say there's not a great deal to commend Headley itself because of its location, but it does have lots of amazing 9-house developments. They never seem to be 10 in order to achieve affordable housing. It's always, and I do note that if there's already 9 there and this is another 9, that's a little bit of a salami slice approach. But however, that's a different issue. I think with a PIP, it's very difficult to turn it down.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded for to move the officer's recommendation. I've got one more hand up with Councillor Harvey, and then we'll go to the vote. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm conscious you can't put conditions on a PIP, so we can't actually get the information that would be helpful to the application in the first place. I'm correct in that answer. Officers are nodding at me that you can't condition a PIP.
No, you can't condition a PIP, that's quite right.
So the applicant has chosen to bring the PIP forward without information that would be of benefit to the committee in making the decision on a more sure footing. Therefore, we can only judge it on the information that's in front of us. And if the officers are saying that there is a biodiversity risk and we have no information to say that there isn't, then we have to take that into account. If we have an argument about landscape, again, there's no debate about the information in front of us because we just don't have it. So again, we take our officers' advice on the basis that the applicant has not provided us because they've chosen to do it on a basis of a PIP with the information that's in front of us. Now, we've done this on other applications for PIPs where the information wasn't available, where we had similar concerns and we've rejected those PIPs, or we've sought to reject those PIPs. And if the applicant was brave enough and wanted to bring forward an outline application where they wanted to give us a level of detail, that's in their gift to do that. They could if they wanted to give that. I do take Councillor Fontane's point that they've chosen to split this into a slice of 9 and a slice of 9. And far be it from me to be, in any way in questioning why that is the case, because that's not what's before us. But it does beg the question, doesn't it, in terms of a PIP. Do we have all the information to be sure that the principle of development is accepted in this place? And our officers are telling us not. I would be much happier if the applicant had actually brought an outline application forward with a lot more detail attached to it and wasn't using the PIP process, because I think the committee would be better served and our officers would be better served by then having the information to put in the report to advise us beyond what we've already been given. So yeah, I understand why the recommendation has been moved for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Hussey, did you second that? I thought you had. Just for everybody, if you are proposing something or seconding it, could you make it crystal clear? It's been moved and seconded for approval of the officer decision, so the officer's decision to refuse. Those in favour of refusal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. And those against the officer's recommendation? 2. Thank you. The officer's recommendation carries. And Greg?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to confirm that that application is refused for the reasons in the order paper. Thank you, Chair.
Right. I am bowing out for the next one and will be speaking as a borough councillor. It's 9:10. Is anybody in desperate need of a comfort break before we carry on? Yeah, so we'll have literally 5-minute break and Councillor Harvey will be sat here when we come back.
Okay, members, are we ready to start again, please? So, this is item 7 on the agenda, QPS House, the Street, Bramley. Can I ask Mr. Flukes if you come forward to the speaker place, please, and sit in the blue chair? And we'll just introduce the item, and then I'll come to you. Okay, Gemma, over to you to introduce the item, please.
Thank you. Item 7 seeks planning permission for the conversion of the ground floor from a tanning studio and barber shop to one 2-bedroom flat and a retail unit falling within U Class EA at QPS House, the Street, Bramley. Members will note from the relevant planning history listed on page 290 of the main agenda that the site has extensive planning history. Of most relevance, I would like to highlight the most recent application. This application was refused, and this current application seeks to overcome that previous reason for refusal by increasing the amount of retail floor space to be retained. If I could please draw members' attention to the update paper. It is advised that there is a slight inaccuracy on the main agenda. On page 290, under the Principle of Development section, it states that the proposed development would result in the loss of a retail unit. It is confirmed that whilst the proposed development would result in the conversion of the existing retail unit to a dwelling house, a new retail unit is proposed as part of the proposal, albeit of a slightly reduced size. Therefore, the proposed development does retain a retail unit on the site. The application has been brought to the Development Control Committee in line with the scheme of delegation due to the number of objections received and the officer's recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Gemma. Councillor Flukes, you have 4 minutes to address us. It's the silver button on the speaker in front of you, and I will give you a minute's warning as you get close to the end. Thank you.
Yes, good evening. I'm Councillor Chris Flukes. I'm the chair of the Development Committee in Bramley Parish Council. The village developed its neighbourhood development plan around the requirement for at least 200 houses by 2029. Since then, some 350 have been built or approved, which demonstrates the village has more than met its target with respect to housing supply in the borough of Basingstoke and Deane. This figure includes 14 converted from our small supply of office buildings, which used to provide local employment opportunities. This conversion was contrary to policy E1 of the NDP. All these developments have provided no extra retail or commercial space. All possible local housing need has already been met by housing completions and approvals as mandated by policy H2 of the NDP. QPS House is the only retail space currently available in the village and has housed several successful businesses prior to them having their leases terminated. There is currently no retail space west of the railway line except QPS House. And it should be noted that the existing plans submitted with this application are far from accurate. Prior to the decision to refuse application 00740, the premises had been converted to give a tiny retail space with direct access onto the street. This space has been operating as a barber shop during the pandemic, despite having no included washing or toilet facilities. As the committee is no doubt aware, the sewage system in Bramley is struggling to cope with present flows. Even a small increase in flow may become the straw that breaks the camel's back. In short, this has been going backwards and forwards. They keep changing their mind, and the drawings of, as it stands at the moment, just don't bear what is being built there. I'm sorry, someone is having a laugh on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flukes. Are there any questions to the councillor? None? Thank you. If you'd like to wipe the table down and sit down. Turn the microphone off in the process. That's good. Thank you. Our next speaker is Miss Gardner. Would you come forward, please? Do we have Miss Gardner? No. In which case, can I ask Miss Christina Wall to come forward? Thank you, Miss Wall. You also have 4 minutes if you'd like to press the large silver button on the microphone. Thank you.
Good evening, members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you today on behalf of the applicant.
The lawful planning use of CPS House is for a tanning shop which has a sui generis use and a retail unit, a barber's shop, at ground floor. At first floor there are 2 residential units. This proposal looks to retain the retail unit at ground floor but also provide 1 additional residential unit with 2 bedrooms. There would be no change at first floor. The retail unit would be moved from one side of the building to the other. The tenants operating the tanning shop left without paying rent and owed money to the other suppliers. The applicants have been unsuccessful at getting businesses to rent the space. Typical reasons for this are that the location is too remote and it's not affordable. Previous businesses operating out of QPS House have left there as there has not been enough footfall. At no time has the applicant terminated contracts and kicked tenants out as claimed by members of the community. The barbers are currently operating from QPS House and it is their intention to continue to do so in the retained retail unit. Notwithstanding this intention, the proposed size of the retail unit could accommodate a range of retail units and therefore, in the long term, retention of the retail unit is protected. The Council's policy team agree with this. Policy CN7, Essential Facilities and Services of the Basingstoke Local Plan, looks to retain retail uses. This proposal therefore meets the policy requirement through the retention of the retail unit. There is no policy protection for sui generis uses due to the unique nature of the uses they could cover. Basingstoke and Deane cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. There is therefore a district-wide need for new housing. Whilst only small, this proposal would make a contribution to providing housing to meet the district's needs. The site is located within the settlement policy boundary where there is in principle support for housing. In addition, the site is extremely sustainable in its location due to it being within walking distance of the train station, and so reliance on the private car would be minimal. The external changes proposed are minimal and in keeping with the character and appearance of the building and wider area. They would not give rise to any amenity impacts. There is ample space available to accommodate the required car parking spaces. Space for 5 vehicles currently exists, but the proposal only requires 3 car parking spaces, so a parking plan can be provided to the Council to confirm the exact final layout of the 3 spaces to meet the current size requirements. Existing cycle parking is available for the existing residential units and retail unit, and additional cycle parking can be provided within the private amenity space for the 1 additional residential unit. Parking standards are thereby met. As set out within your officer's committee report, there are no sound planning reasons to refuse the planning application. The proposal complies with the up-to-date development plan documents. On behalf of the applicant, we hope you're minded to agree with the advising planning officer and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions to the speaker? None? Thank you. Councillor Robinson. I shall say anyway, you have 4 minutes, press the button in front of you.
Thank you. And thank you from this end of the table for a change. Bramley has approximately 3,000 houses, 10% of which have been built in the last 10 years or so. And in that time, there has not been a single additional square metre of retail space. And commercial space, we've lost quite a bit. We lost Minchin's Barnes. So we've no more retail space and we've got less commercial space. This takes away the most ideal site for a shop. It's absolutely at the centre of the village. It's 50 yards from the station. It's directly opposite the local pub. It's got its own parking. I think you have 4 or 5 parking spaces to the front. You can see there, access directly off the road through Bramley. It's got another couple of parking spaces around the back. It's just the perfect place. And to lose this in Bramley, when we've had all the development that Bramley's taken, to lose this retail space is tragic for Bramley. And I honestly believe it contravenes EM7. It's the loss of a local facility which we should not be losing. I ask you, please refuse this planning application. Let's have the whole of the ground floor of this building as a shop, a hairdresser's, a nail bar, whatever needs to be there. There is plenty of opportunity to rent this. So I believe it contravenes EM7 and ask you to refuse it on those grounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Any questions to Councillor Robinson? None. Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. He's in there first. I like it. There's always one. That's good.
I'll just let you leave.
Thank you.
The spot. Thank you. Just for the record, Councillor Robinson's leaving the room, and we'll carry on just as he has. Right, members, do you have any questions to officers next? There are none. Debate. Oh, Councillor Ganesh.
Thanks, Chair. What's the loss of retail space in terms of square feet or square metre?
So the existing retail unit measures 43 square metres and the proposed is for 36 square metres. And of interest that the previous application only was providing 13 square metres of retail space.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, debate. Who's going to lead off at all? Is anybody going to recommend any proposal? Councillor Frost.
Yeah, I'll advise the committee of my thoughts in the fact that in light of the small change, it's only, 9 square metres of retail space that's been lost. So I'm minded to go with the officer recommendation on this particular one. Yes, I know that Bramwood's had a lot of building, but you know, I think this is balanced, and I can't see how it contravenes EM 7, I think it was. Thank you. Sorry? Was it Charlie Mike 7? Charlie November 7, thank you.
Is that a recommendation that you make?
If no one else is going to make one, then yes.
I will take that as a recommendation because nobody else has. Do I have a seconder for your recommendation? Councillor Leeks is seconding that recommendation. Okay, it's a recommendation for approval as the officers are set out in the report. All those in favour of approval, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, thank you. And all those against? 3. That is carried 6-3. Officer, would you like to confirm?
Thank you. Application is approved as set out in the main agenda and subject to the conditions listed at the end of the report.
Councillor Robertson's coming back in and will now take the chair.
Right, item 8. Land north of Wildmere, Horhurst Hill, Borghurst. If we could have Mr. Jackson to the speaking chair, please.
Point of order, can we move standing orders for this last item? It's 20
Sorry.
past.
Okay, it is, I make it 9:27, so we have been going for 3 hours, so we need your approval to continue. Is everybody happy with that? We've got one item left. Yeah, everybody happy. Thank you for that. Mr. Jackson, if you can just wait there for a few minutes whilst the officer introduces the case.
Thank you, Chair. This is a technical details consent for the erection of one dwelling following the grant of a permission in principle last October. And as Greg explained earlier, the difference between the two, the permission in principle did just that, establish the principle. This application therefore proposes all of the details to sit alongside that permission in principle. You will see from the officer's report that all of those matters have been addressed. I draw attention to the update paper. So photographs have been submitted from a third party to indicatively show the additional height and depth of the proposed dwelling. in comparison to the neighbouring property. The report, as you will see, addresses impact on neighbouring properties, including Shalom, and these photographs do not alter the conclusion already reached by officers. A landscape plan has also been received since the writing of the main report, which covers some of the matters required by proposed condition 4, however not all of those, so officers are suggesting that condition remains should the technical details consent be granted. The applicant has also provided some additional points of clarification in regard to a number of matters, and again these are not material and not new information and doesn't alter the officer's recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Lisa. Mr. Jackson, you have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you've got 1 minute left. It's silver button on the microphone.
Good evening, councillors. I live at the property renamed Shalom, shown on the plan as Hilltop. This is directly next to the proposed development. I ask you to please reject this proposal for the following reasons. The site is agricultural land. The applicants applied for change of use to residential. This was refused. They appealed and it went to court in Bristol. This too was refused. They were, however, granted a different plot for residential use. Why don't the applicants apply to build a dwelling on this more suitable residential plot? I attended the PIP committee meeting. One councillor stated, and I quote, "The PIP is only to decide if a house would fit on this plot of land and not to take into account any other details." End quote. Therefore, this councillor and others voted to approve the PIP. Even so, the final result was a split decision of 6-4 and 5 against. Therefore, we must consider the objections from the PIP committee meeting. You would have noticed on your site visit that the plot is extremely sloped and uneven. It's approximately 20 feet lower than the road, that's front to back, and 8 feet lower than the access track side to side. A significant amount of land will need to be excavated and raised to level this. The PIP plans showed the new dwelling to be in line with Shalom. The TDC plans now show the dwelling to be 4.6 metres from the rear of Shalom and 1 metre higher. This new offset location does not match the pattern of Shalom and its neighbouring houses down the hill. Please see the submitted photos. Note the extreme overshadowing, view and light blocking implications, towering not only over Shalom's back garden and only patio area, but the removal of all views from all 11 windows to include all 4 of the main bedroom windows. It will block views, sunrise and direct sunlight for the entire morning. The effects of this in winter would be devastating as the sun remains very low in the sky. The original inline position blocked only the 2 side windows of the main bedroom. The case officer's reasons for approval report states, and I quote, "The overshadowing would not be detrimental. With the roof form pitched away from the boundary, it will soften the impact." End quote. No amount of roof form pitching away will soften the impact of this extreme overshadowing. This dwelling is now in a position to maximise the harm and overshadowing to Shalom. If a new house was to be considered, it should at very least be in line with Shalom, and given the extremely damaging height issues, it should only be single storey. I fail to understand why the case officer has brushed over this issue, and contrary to the report, the position of this dwelling would be in violation of the MPPF and policies EM10 and EM11. Also contrary to the case officer's report, Hawkhurst Hill is not a village, it is a standalone road terminating into a nature reserve. Shalom is the first house on the left in Hawkhurst Hill. The next property on this side is not until Inhurst Lane. The new site is not an infill, but an encroachment onto undeveloped agricultural land. It would create a very undesirable precedent for further development in this very rural area. The site is a natural soakaway with a very high groundwater level and is regularly flash flooded. There is also a natural spring that runs through the site and down the hill. The proposed development will result in water runoff into Shalom and further down the hill, causing extensive damage. Thank you. Finally, it will be out of character and not respect the qualities of the local landscape or surrounding properties. Shalom is Georgian, built in 1825. The chapel and cottages opposite are 19th century, and our neighbouring houses date back to the 17th and 18th century. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions to the speaker? No, there are none. Thank you very much. If you could just wipe the table down and the microphone button, that'd be appreciated.
Sorry? Oh, is this?
Mr. Pettit. Thank you. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Mark Pettit. As you know, and I prepared and submitted this planning application. The application is recommended for approval, and we fully support this recommendation. This application is seeking technical details consent in respect of a single dwelling at Wildermere in Hawkhurst Hill. The principle of a new home in this location has already been established, following the corresponding permission in principle application being granted at Development Control Committee last October. The proposals are considered to respond successfully to the constraints of the site, including on-site and off-site trees, surface water disposal, ground level changes and neighbouring amenity. What is being presented as part of this application is a modest 3-bedroomed property with accommodation over 2 floors. Its proportions are not considered significant, resulting in a property that will sit comfortably in this part of the settlement among other similar sized houses in similar sized plots. We've given careful consideration to the internal layout of the building and the positioning of windows to ensure that the amenity of neighbouring residents is not compromised by the proposals in a significant way. On the western elevation, closest to Shalom, only 2 small windows are proposed at first floor level. Both of these will serve bathrooms and both will be obscure glazed and fitted with a high level opening. This can be secured by way of an appropriately worded condition, as per suggested condition number 20 in the committee report. Members will also note that the house has been positioned a generous distance away from Shalom to the west, so that Shalom continues to benefit from an appropriate level of natural daylight. The house has been set back into the site to allow as many of the existing trees along the road frontage to be retained as possible, and to allow sufficient parking and turning at the front of the site. It also allows the house to sit more comfortably on the site and much less prominent in the street scene. The setback is not considered to be out of character with the area, and won't have a significant adverse impact on the amenity of residents at Shalom. The applicants are committed to putting a house here that stands the test of time and makes a positive contribution to the character and appearance of the area. A high quality palette of materials will be used, and the applicants are also committed to incorporating energy efficient measures as part of the development. Members will note that solar panels are shown on the southern roof slope to the house. There are no technical reasons why this application should not be approved. Thames Water, Hampshire County Council Highways, Emergency Planning, Waste, Environmental Health and Biodiversity have all raised no objections to the proposals. Furthermore, since the committee report was published, we have submitted additional information in respect of the retaining walls and hard and soft landscaping to address matters raised by the landscape officer and tree officer. This is in addition to the robust and accurate technical reports that formed part of the original application, which included a comprehensive flood risk assessment, ecological report and arboricultural report. The applicants have no objection to the conditions that have been suggested by the officer. These will secure, amongst other things, an appropriate landscape scheme, an appropriate surface water drainage scheme, adequate tree protection during the development, sustainable water use, electrical vehicle charging points, a construction method statement, and obscure glazing at the first floor level on the western elevation.
You have 1 minute.
In summary, the site is considered to be an appropriate location for a single dwelling, as confirmed already by the grant of permission in principle last year. Every effort has been made to ensure that the new house is sensitively designed, works with the topography of the site, makes a positive contribution to the settlement, and does not compromise the wider characteristics of the local area. The amenity of neighbouring residents will not be unduly compromised, and the new dwelling will sit comfortably in its plot. The majority of on-site trees will be retained, and any that do need to be removed will be replaced accordingly. Indeed, a scheme of soft landscaping has been submitted as part of this application, and this will provide an attractive setting for the new dwelling. It will also provide opportunities to add biodiversity interest to the area. No off-site trees are proposed to be removed as part of this application. We therefore respectfully request that technical details consent be granted accordingly in line with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions to the speaker? I see no hands. I have one. I'm sure it's in the report, but I for the life of me can't see it. What are you building this out of? Is it brick and tile, brick and slate, or something more contemporary?
It's brick and slate, and there will be the addition of solar panels on the southern roof slope as well.
Thank you. No more questions. Thank you very much. And you're already doing the wipe down. So, Councillor Poland, again. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you, Chairman. I am here representing the residents of the ward which I represent, but I also must declare that I live in Hawkhurst Hill, albeit further away from the proposed building site. Mr. Jackson has eloquently put before you the reasons why this development should not take place, and has rightly pointed out that when it went before the planning committee, it was put through, or passed rather, by one vote, hardly an endorsement of great magnitude. You will also be aware that this application received no less than nearly 30 objections. There are only 31 houses in the hill. Gives you an indication of the antagonism that this has caused. This is not a built-up area, and although the planning officer talks about this is not in an isolated location, or not in an isolated location rather, it is a rural area. 31 houses in Hawkhurst Hill is not exactly high density. It does actually, at the end of the hill, go down into a nature reserve. It is used by walkers, riders, cyclists, as much as the people that live in the hill. The Highways Authority have made reference to no objections. I would contend that's completely erroneous. This proposed site is right on the corner of a blind bend. You cannot see the access point at all. The property opposite the development has recently been sold, and the person that has acquired that property is currently using it to store an HGV vehicle. You may or may not be aware that that is against the licensing authority. That vehicle is moved on a daily basis, and therefore to suggest that there is no danger on the axis is completely erroneous. Reference has also been made to no flood problem. Yes, there's no flooding as such, but there is an underground stream, and if the members were to visit the site, you would easily see on the hill there is all year round surface water. And over the winter, the people further down from Shalom have to park further up the hill because the road ice is over. So the suggestion that there is no difficulty in parking or access is again disproven, because some of the properties further down from this development don't have garages and have to park on the corner that I mentioned that you can't actually even see round. I think the actual proposal doesn't meet any local need at all, although it does meet a financial need. The financial need being the applicant, who clearly stated some years ago on purchasing the property, but then why wouldn't they, that they bought it with a view to developing and making money. I would suggest that you will, if you pass this proposal, you will have before you very shortly further proposals for development of other land within the curtilage of this property. As Mr. Jackson has already told you, this is agricultural land. Permission was sought to change the use. That was refused.
You have 1 minute.
It was refused. So that indicates the problem. I don't think there is any suggestion at all that there is a local need. In fact, at the moment on Hawkhurst Hill, there are 3 properties for sale. So hardly another one actually coming on the market is going to actually solve a problem. He's also rightly pointed out to the members of the committee the loss of light. This property is significantly above the height of his own, and it will impact massively on the light. The planning officer has made the point that there will be not cause some loss of light, but then actually contradicts that and says, well, yes, there will be some loss of light. So it's either yes or no. It will be yes. It's as simple as that. I don't think there is any merit on this proposal whatsoever, and I think that the committee should take into account, A, the fact that it is currently agricultural land. Where do we stop? It's further incursion into the countryside, and I don't think it should be permitted.
Thank you. Questions to Councillor Poland? I have one, if nobody else has. The principle of developing this site has already been developed, so we're just discussing tonight whether this is the right house to go on that site or not the right house. What is there about this proposal, about this house, that you are objecting to, as opposed to the principle of development?
I think, Chair, that this, if this house was sited further back, the owners of the site actually have a site near to their own property, I would suggest to you that actually perhaps development on that would be more akin to suitable if you're going to develop anywhere, but not on the corner. They make reference in the report about keeping trees and vegetation. I think if the committee were to come and see the site, you would clearly see that that's already been taken down.
So would you like to see this building moved to the northwest or to the southeast? Because those
South.
are sorry, northeast or southwest? Because
Southwest,
those are
sir.
the only options.
Southwest, Chairman, if necessary.
Southwest. Thank you.
Ideally, I would caveat not at all, but I mean, I'm a realist.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Harvey. Could you turn your mic off, please?
Bearing in mind the conversation we had earlier, do you believe that members would benefit from a site viewing of this site if we were to actually see it in context rather than make a decision this evening?
Well, you will see it. And certainly the people next door will see it massively.
Forgive me, you misunderstand. If members were to defer the application this evening to come on a site visit to the site to actually see it, would that, do you believe, be of benefit given the context in which you're setting it?
I think that's an excellent suggestion, and I think it will be very warranted, because I think you will see some of the significant issues and difficulties that a building on this particular corner of the area would have. I agree entirely.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much. If you can have a quick bite down again. Questions to officers? No, not yet. Yeah. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to, Councillor Harvey, it's twice in one evening, okay, that I'm agreeing with you. Okay, I would like to, you know, propose that we defer this pending a site visit. Okay, and I'm happy should Councillor Harvey put this as a motion. I will happily second it. If he doesn't wish to do so, then I will happily place the motion, and I'm sure somebody else will second it.
Okay, we can go to a site visit. I've got the advantage I remember visiting the site before, so I do have a bit of an advantage on it. But the only thing I will say, it will not change the fact that this site has already got permission in principle to put a house on. That is going to remain, and the site visit is never going to change that. So what we are discussing is whether the house should be moved this way, that way, should be bigger or smaller. But I think I have a proposal for deferment and a seconder for deferment. So those in favour of deferment, and that looks pretty unanimous to me. So that item is deferred.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, site viewing will take place again on the 3rd of September.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think according to my agenda, we're done. Thank you very much, everybody. Meeting closed at 9:47, and thank you very much to the officers for all their input.